What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the top 10 of my deep dive series. Today, we break down the Houston Texans. And it's fitting that this team wears Spider-Man colors because with great power comes great responsibility. And the Texans have discovered their great power, being that outstanding young quarterback on a rookie contract. But with that does come the responsibility, or maybe the expectations, to win. And the Texans did not waste any time going after it this offseason. Big additions, Danielle Hunter, Stephon Diggs, among others. Going to be really fun to talk about today, what their chances are at meeting those big expectations that they've found themselves sitting on top of. Also going to be a fun deep dive because Brett Kollmann is going to join us here on the back end of the show. An interview you are not going to want to miss. Brett has been through some rough years for the Texans, so we get to see what hopeful, optimistic Brett Kollmann looks like when he's talking about the Texans. Very much looking forward to that. Before we do dive in, if you could take just a second to hit that like button to show your support for the series. It takes just a second. It really helps me out. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the remaining episodes in this countdown. But let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at the Texans offseason, where they got better, where they got worse. Starting at the coaching staff, no change there, staying neutral. At quarterback, no change there, staying neutral. They're happy with what they discovered with both of those groups last year. But at running back, they go and trade for Joe Mixon right before he got released by the Cincinnati Bengals. So he comes in, and Devin Singletary is out, heading to the New York Giants. Those are the main names exchanging hands there, but they did sign Cam Akers, who was let go by the Vikings just a couple weeks ago, and a 6th-round pick on Jawar Jordan. I do think Joe Mixon is an upgrade over Devin Singletary. I do list that as upgraded, though it's maybe not as substantial as some might think, but still an upgrade. At tight end, they did spend a 4th-round pick on Cade Stover, not expected to play much this year, though, so we're going to stay neutral at tight end. At wide receiver, definitely upgraded. They didn't lose anybody. Even their depth pieces are back, and they add Stephon Diggs. And just for the fun of it, they bring in Ben Skoranek, half wide receiver, half fullback. We'll see if he makes the team. But clearly, upgrading a position group that was already a strength for this team last year. But then on the offensive line, this is going to be very much to be determined. There's reason to believe it can be better, but a lot of snaps leaving from last year. George Fant, who miraculously played 82% of this team's snaps last year and held up pretty well at right tackle. And Michael Dieter, who played 2/3 of their games at center. Those guys are out, along with Josh Jones, who got 19% of snaps. And then it's really a lot of unproven talent, quote unquote, being added here. You do have the 2nd-round pick, Blake Fisher, who I do like. And then a couple of guys coming back from injury last year. Yes, these are two different people, Kenyon Green and Kendrick Green. Kenyon, a former 1st-round pick who missed his sophomore season, if you will, for injury last year. And Kendrick Green they acquired from the Steelers, played a little bit, looked okay, and then got hurt. So a lot of moving pieces with the offensive line, and just going to be determined on if they got better there or not. But then you look at the defense. Actually, a lot more movement here than you would think, maybe, for a team that had a bit of a breakout season last year. Starting with the interior of the defensive line, I actually think this group is downgraded. Both Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins got them about 45-plus pressures, 7-8 sacks, more or less. They were good players and got paid in free agency. They're no longer back with the team. They did take a bit of a shotgun approach to try and replace that production, most notably with Danico Autry, who at 34 years old, perhaps deliberately took some PEDs to sustain his career a little bit. He's going to miss 6 games, but a nice signing nonetheless when he gets back. Folu Fadukasi, who flamed out with the Jags after a big free agency signing. Mario Edwards, who's bounced around the league. Tim Settle, one of my original My Guys on this channel, has had a hard time emerging as anything more than a rotational piece. And a 7th-round pick on Marcus Harris out of Auburn. It is, needless to say, a very new-look group on the interior of the defensive line that ultimately I do think will be downgraded from what they got there last year, but upgraded at edge. Jonathan Grenard was good for them last year, but only played 55% of their snaps. They let him go and basically swap with Danielle Hunter, who comes over from Minnesota, with Grenard heading to Minnesota. Hunter coming off a monster season, one of the bigger additions a team made in free agency. So got to say, upgraded there. They also spent a 7th-round pick on Solomon Byrd out of USC. At linebacker, I'm not going to panic about this, but I actually do say slightly downgraded here as well. Blake Cashman just played so well for them, and even Denzel Perriman played half of the games and was still pretty good old Denzel Perriman when he played. They elect for more of a D'Amico Ryans guy in Aziz Al-Shaair, who he coached in San Francisco. I get why they like him, but I don't think he was better than Blake Cashman last year, at least from what he's shown so far in 1 year as a starter. So I'm going to say slightly downgraded at linebacker. They also spent a 6th-round pick on a developmental Jamal Hill out of Oregon. At cornerback, I struggled with this one. This really comes down to losing Steven Nelson, who retired, I believe, still played 93% of their snaps last year and was very reliable, even at his age. They're looking to replace that with 2nd-round pick Kamari Lassiter, their first pick in this draft. I like Lassiter, but those are actually fairly big shoes to fill. I think he's up to the task, but this is kind of quasi-downgraded / to be determined, counting on a rookie there. I also think their depth got worse in the slot. Tavier Thomas was really good slot depth. He might be starting this year for the Bucs. And Shaq Griffin, they did cut him, but he wasn't horrible when he played for them last year. They're replacing them with a pair of top 10 picks from the 2020 draft. Nick Caserio, their GM, must have liked these guys in that draft. But Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson will round out the depth. So I guess we'll see at corner as the year goes on, if they're better or worse there. At safety, I'm just going to say neutral. DeAndre Houston-Carson actually played half their snaps last year. Decent veteran safety. I don't know that 3rd-round pick Kalen Bullock as a backup's going to provide more than Houston-Carson did for them last year, so I will say neutral. But then at special teams, they do upgrade at punter. Cameron Johnston has pretty consistently graded out pretty poorly. Tommy Townsend, on the other hand, has been grading out extremely well for the Chiefs. So looking to improve their field position via the punt game this year. Honestly, for an offseason that is so well revered by most pundits, and I agree, they got better this offseason, but they did really shuffle the deck, specifically on defense there. And it's never a guarantee that all these pieces work out. That's not really a take. I just do find it fascinating. It feels like a lot of times when these teams kind of break out unexpectedly, they try to retain a lot of the guys that worked for them last year. That's not really the case with the Texans. They are looking to get better, really, is what it comes down to. But it does add some volatility to the whole picture here. But of course, when you have a coaching staff that you can trust as much as the Texans should feel they can here in Houston, you're willing to open up some of that roster movement and volatility. And this all starts with D'Amico Ryans. And we said this when they hired him, that the Texans were lucky, given the state of their organization, to have a former Texans player in D'Amico Ryans also be one of the top head coaching candidates on the market that year. They were able to attract him back to Houston, and what a gift that was. Looked every bit the part of a high-end NFL head coach right away. And to do that as a defensive head coach is not easy. And I've been very critical of a lot of defensive head coaches in this series, but I feel I've been pretty consistent in saying that if you are going to hire a defensive head coach, he better be one of the elite defensive coaches in the league. Someone that is truly going to elevate your roster basically to a level that the 15 to 20 other good defensive coordinators, many of which were failed former head coaches, can do for you. And I do think D'Amico Ryans is one of those guys for the Texans. In year one for this Texans team, this defense had an identity. They were second in run defense DVOA when they had no business being that high with how many moving pieces they had on the defensive side of the ball. The pass defense got better as the year went on as well. And from a culture standpoint, rewind the clock a year ago. The Texans were a laughingstock, yet now the Texans are everybody's love child, and everybody loves this locker room. I can't say that's all DeMeco Ryans' work, but certainly gets a lot of credit for it. That's for damn sure. And being, a younger, recent former player, I just think he resonates with these players. And this is a guy that they want to go to battle for and go to the office every day, if you will, looking to get better. So the coaching ranks for DeMeco Ryans, needless to say, are very favorable already in year 2. He ranks as my 11th overall head coach, 9th to 12th for overall coach and culture, that sort of benefit of the doubt slider. I think they've already earned some of that. But then very good, 7th to 16th for pass defense coaching. Again, there's a lot of high-end defensive coaches in the league, but most notably here, 1st to 5th for run defense coaching. I mentioned the Texans were 2nd in run defense DVOA last year. I find that incredibly impressive given the crazy rotation they had to deal with injuries and just figuring out who was any good in their front 7. Even in the secondary, they had a bunch of moving pieces as well. But it wasn't just last year. The 49ers were 2nd in run defense DVOA in 2022 as well. So DeMeco Ryans has done wonders with his run defense and deserves nothing other than to be ranked tied for the best in the league in terms of coaching up the run game on the defensive side of the ball, of course. Now, as far as what DeMeco Ryans' scheme looks like, this is very much a established sort of coaching tree at this point. The Robert Saleh tree. It's the Jets, the Texans, the Niners, of course, and now the Green Bay Packers with Jeff Hafley, all kind of in this branch. But it's at the core a pretty balanced 4-2 system in the sense of they're not overly blitz happy, but they will blitz when appropriate. And in terms of mixing and matching coverages on the back end, it's in general very multiple and adaptable. The primary coverages in these systems are going to be cover 1, cover 3, and a lot of cover 4 on 3rd and longs. But I've talked about how the coaches in this system don't seem to spam cover 4 or cover 6 all the time, like a lot of those Fangio disciples, where you end up with this kind of soft, conservative, squishy defense. DeMeco and all these coordinators in this system use quarters smartly, and it's worked really well for all these teams. And then another big identity of these fronts is how they craft their front. It's a 4-man front, but they really lean into slants and games and stunts to just cause chaos for the offensive line. I love the term, make it feel like you're running into a hurricane every snap. And what you'll notice with the Texans and the Jets and the Niners and some of the Packers now is they're not afraid to play with lighter defensive tackles, because instead of saying, all right, you're going to play stout, you're going to 2-gap, you're going to take on double teams, hold your lane, stack, shed, engage the point of attack, like most of the teams in the league ask of their defensive linemen and is traditionally asked. These systems get a little bit more gamey up front, if you will, and they'll have these guys cross gaps or shoot gaps using their athleticism more than size and play strength. Hopefully you can knife into the backfield or split a gap and force the running back to change lane, get linemen throwing up their arms because you don't know which direction they're slanting from, and then let the linebackers really clean stuff up from the second level. And for the Texans specifically to have been 2nd in the NFL in run defense with that type of style, which is typically more boom or bust, but I think DeMeco has a clear feel for calling that type of front. And it's not like they do that every single play, but there's a lot of that. And you look at what happened in San Francisco, DeMeco leaves and their run defense got worse. But that's definitely a key identity of this defense. And something to keep in mind as we look at the interior defensive line later, why they're able to live with some of these more undersized dudes in the middle of the defense. But let's flip things over to the offensive side of the ball with Bobby Slowick, yet another hot ascending name here from the Shanahan-McVay system. And when the Texans hired him, it was like, well, we've never really seen much from him, but seems like a sound hire and will probably work because the majority of the hires from guys either out of San Francisco or LA under McVay and Shanahan, they just work. And that's what happened with Bobby Slowick. And he was awesome in year 1 with the Texans. Such a great hire here. And obviously Stroud deserves incredible credit, but man, the amount of just great schemed up passing concepts that Bobby Slowick was bringing to the Texans last year mostly off of play action, but not exclusive to play action. This is, of course, one of these Shanahan systems that's going to come out and use the threat of the run, build off of that with play action. I think if you're a Texans fan or you've watched this series, you are pretty familiar with how the Shanahan system works. It's like we have to kind of pick our battles with how many deep dive episodes we want to break down the Shanahan system because 2 out of 3 teams in the league are running it. But the Texans are clearly one of them. But it has very much worked here in Houston. They grade out very well in terms of offensive coaching here. Specifically in the passing game, they're inside the top 10, 8 to 10 with a B-plus grade. The one thing with Bobby Sloak that I think we want to see this year is can they get the run game to actually work? They ran the ball a lot, but oftentimes into a brick wall without some of the innovations that we've seen from some of these Shanahan-style systems around the league where they don't necessarily lean as much on zone and wide zone running, getting into more duo, gap, counter stuff. You want to see a little bit more creativity in the run game. They grade out much worse for run game coaching, 22nd to 26th. That would be probably an evolution in Bobby Slowick's abilities as a coach that would almost certainly get him a head coaching job next year. And that is the one downside to having DeMeco Ryans is anytime one of these offensive coordinators is good for them, it's only a matter of 1 or 2 years until one of these guys leaves. So it does feel almost inevitable that the Texans are going to have to get a pipeline of young coaches ready. It's not impossible to replicate this system, but there is some guys have it and some guys don't, if you know what I'm saying, in terms of play calling and game flow and all that stuff. Something to keep an eye on, but at least for this year, this coaching staff is absolutely set, rocking, rolling, ready to go. And just a last note, I didn't talk about Matt Burke, the placeholder defensive coordinator here. It's DeMeco Ryans' defense. I think Matt Burke is here very much as a kind of veteran, stoic voice in the room. He's run a mass variety of systems with Jeff Fisher, Jim Schwartz, Marvin Lewis, Vance Joseph, some staple defensive coordinators. He's worked for all those guys, has kind of seen it all, ran it all. I can only imagine is a good pool of information for DeMeco to be like, hey, in 2007, when you were with Jeff Fisher, what would you guys do in this situation? Or what were some of your favorite blitzes under Vance Joseph in Arizona? What made Jim Schwartz tick as a defensive coach? Those types of questions, I think, are pools of information that are valuable to someone like DeMeco Ryans. Probably not someone, though, that's going to be climbing the ladder at this stage, though. Now, before we dive into the roster and break down every position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. So preseason football is kind of fun to watch, but when you can get involved with pick'em contests at Underdog Fantasy, they're actually really fun to watch, and you get a chance to win some money. If you've got those second string running backs or backup quarterbacks that you want to pull for, you can go in, pick their stats higher or lower, and then enjoy the game. It'll keep you invested into the third and fourth quarter of these games as the backups come in. I've been loving it, and we'll continue to play Underdog Pick'ems as preseason goes on and, of course, into the regular season. It's also your kind of last couple of weeks to do your best ball drafts. If you want to scratch that itch, go do some drafts, get a chance to win some money. Best ball is just draft and forget it. They will set your best lineup every week. No trades, no waivers, you name it. I find myself starting my morning off with a best ball draft every day too. Underdog's just the best, man, and they're the best for sponsoring this video and this series. So if you sign up right now using promo code TFG, they will match up to $250 on your first deposit. And maybe more importantly, you will support my channel in a big, big way. If you've appreciated this series, you want a kind of win-win way to show some love my way, that's honestly the best way to do it. Sign up at Underdog, and good luck with your fantasy this year. But let's start the roster breakdown with this quarterback room and my public apology for being wrong about CJ Stroud. And it's just crazy how off my evaluation on CJ Stroud was. When the Texans took him I really felt like they were getting something like a Jared Goff type of quarterback, maybe a peak Ryan Tannehill from those good Titans teams, in a quarterback that was going to be a good NFL quarterback, played on time, great accuracy, kind of a high floor, quote unquote, system quarterback, if you will. And I felt that way because I watched every drop back of CJ Stroud in his final season at Ohio State and maybe 4 or 5 games in his sophomore season from Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave being there. And the reality is, like, he just wasn't a playmaker at Ohio State for the vast majority of his career. I showed clips of it and felt I had legitimate criticisms of his pocket presence and even some of his decision-making and, frankly, lack of arm talent and accuracy when throwing on the run a lot of the times at Ohio State. But of course, for those draft heads out there, there was the Georgia game, right? The Georgia game, the Georgia game, the Georgia game. His legacy game where he balled out. And it's not that I didn't see him doing that at Georgia, where he also played in structure and did all the stuff he had been doing for 2 years at Ohio State. But all of a sudden at Georgia, or against Georgia, he was extending plays, making throws on the run, these huge, elite quarterbacking plays that were able to really elevate the offense, which to that point in his Ohio State career, I had kind of doubted if he was going to be able to do that. And unfortunately for me, I took the side of, well, I think he'll probably be closer to what he was the 20-plus games that I watched before the Georgia game, as opposed to he just unlocked a new level of himself in that one game that did happen to be the last game of his college career and on the biggest stage. And I picked the wrong side, man, because now watching him in Houston, he's Georgia game CJ Stroud all the time. And it's a freaking hoot, man. He is awesome. And all those people that kind of broke out Joe Burrow comps on CJ Stroud in the draft, I got to say, man, you were right. There is a lot of Joe Burrow in CJ Stroud's game, being a very cerebral quarterback that I did always say was there at Ohio State. He was very, very much like better running an NFL-style offense than I had expected to see for an Ohio State quarterback. It was not Justin Fields staring down first reads and late to get his ball out. CJ Stroud was very good at that stuff. That's where the Jared Goff comp came in. Maybe a Dak Prescott comp snuck in there as well. But he still had that in the NFL as a rookie quarterback on top of, by the way, exceptional accuracy. I always praised him for his accuracy. And not just he can hit the door type of accuracy, give guys catchable balls. He has like hit the keyhole type of accuracy where he just drops these gorgeous balls in stride and sets these wide receivers up for extra rack opportunities. And I feel like oftentimes we just say, oh yeah, he's accurate, and then carry on to the next thing. But like, this is genuine elite level accuracy and precision that we're seeing from CJ Stroud. And we saw it at Ohio State. That is like my favorite trait of him from his college tape, but we saw it in Houston here as well. And yes, it's true that Nico Collins and Tank Dell were better receivers than we anticipated heading into the year. But it went hand in hand. CJ Stroud helped those guys play at an even higher level because in the case of Nico Collins, he's able to catch these gorgeous inbreakers on time consistently where he doesn't have to turn around and lose his momentum, change direction to adjust for the catch. It's just right there in stride like money. And then in the case of Tank Dell, I mentioned this in my draft grades video where I was kind of 50-50 on Tank Dell, but I loved this landing spot with CJ Stroud because of his accuracy. If you're going to be maybe the smallest starting wide receiver in the league, to have one of the most accurate quarterbacks is a huge deal because your catch radius is so small. He can get open, but if throws are a foot or two off the mark consistently, it would hurt a Tank Dell, and it did often hurt him at Houston, dealing with a much less accurate Clayton Tune. But Stroud just has an innate feel for throwing the football. We talk so much about arm talent, and immediately I think our minds go to arm strength, like how much can you rip the football? But a big part of it too is just, for lack of a better term, just owning the football and having that ability to put it wherever you want, whenever you want, whether he's off platform, about to get hit, or from a clean structure within the pocket, of course. He has rare arm talent, though I wouldn't say he has one of the 10 strongest arms among starters in the league. But that was all kind of why I had the Jared Goff comp on him, who also has great command of the football. Where he really surprised was the out-of-structure playmaking from Stroud and really the pocket presence, or at least the feel inside the pocket against the rush, depending on your definition of pocket presence. But like I said, Georgia game CJ Stroud was just NFL CJ Stroud, really from the get-go. He had a Joe Burrow-esque ability to extend plays when necessary and just miraculously find his way out of sacks, make incredible throws on the run, see throwing windows down the field that just a lot of quarterbacks aren't capable of seeing. And I think Stroud's arm is a little stronger than Joe Burrow, but it's similar to what I just said, where it's like, okay, he doesn't have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers arm strength, but almost the entire field and any throw is still available to him because he's got that hip torque. He has such confidence in his arm and just rare instincts and accuracy to make these throws. And it's just weird because at Ohio State, I vividly remember the Notre Dame game. There was like 2 or 3 throws where he's rolling out and he leaves it 5 yards short of the guy's ankles on throws that you would expect him to be able to make. But all of a sudden, he's able to make those throws. And I think it's here to stay. If you're wondering if I saw like any negative things on him getting through his tape, not really. I mean, I do think even though he was making these incredible plays out of structure, there were some times where it was like almost a little too much, where he would abandon the structure of the play just a little early. He's a young quarterback. I think he can find that balance, especially when we know the structure stuff is shown to be so good. I guess if there's anything that's going to limit his consistency enough from being like an elite quarterback, it might be that. It's not enough that I'm calling it a concern, though, at this point, especially when a lot of times when he does that, he's able to do really great stuff out of structure, and it's usually a net neutral at the end of it anyway. And beyond that, it's just like, okay, general processing and decision-making. He was amazing at it for a rookie, but that's for a rookie. Can he go from amazing for a rookie to amazing by NFL standards? Can he fully get to that Joe Burrow, maybe, I don't know, Dak Prescott, maybe, like those elite processing and decision-making level quarterbacks in the league? Can he get that part of his game to keep climbing? There's plenty of reason to believe that it will, right? But were there missed reads and bad decisions on tape? Yeah, he was still a rookie quarterback, right? So ultimately, I have him ranked as my 11th quarterback right now, heading into this season. A lot of people are going to say, you're still a CJ Stroud hater. That's too low. I'm just slower to react in my process. It's the same reason why Jordan Love came in 13th. I do think sample size matters in this league. Progression isn't always a clean, straight line. There is a world where a couple things go wrong and Stroud is as good as last year or maybe even a touch worse. And then 2025, he's even better than he is right now. Sometimes this league is just weird. But if you want to be more on the I was there first with CJ Stroud as a top 5 quarterback trajectory and you're more, projecting forward, more power to you. I'm not really going to sit here and argue with you on that. Personally, I think, ranking as the 11th quarterback with an up arrow after 1 year is plenty of respect for Stroud, and I'm just really excited to see where this goes and what he can accomplish for the Texans, because he definitely feels like a quarterback that this team has legit hopes to win a Super Bowl with pretty soon, pretty quickly, and it's always a good thing to have as many quarterbacks like a CJ Stroud in the league as possible, because he's just, like I said, he's just an absolute riot. He's so fun to watch. Now, as far as the backup room is concerned, Davis Mills as a backup, you could do a hell of a lot worse. I feel like he's a guy that is still getting better and, perhaps kind of sitting around waiting for an opportunity to show that maybe he deserves a starting opportunity somewhere someday. I don't think that's the craziest, best case scenario for him. Thought he looked good in the Hall of Fame game. So nice backup to have. He started all year for them on a bad football team as a rookie and, was okay-ish. They do have Case Keenum as well. Their backup room is actually really good. If Stroud has to miss a game or two, I think they could win 1 out of 2 if the rest of the team plays well. It's a nice little feather in their cap. Now, besides C.J. Stroud himself and his own trajectory, another reason to believe Stroud is only going to continue to climb these quarterback ranks and have a monster season is this group of weapons that the Texans have what a difference a year makes. We had major questions about this group last year. A couple of young players have been hits here, and then they go add Stephon Diggs just because why not? So it's a pretty special group. They rank 5th to 6th in the league for weaponry with an A- grade. And there is kind of this overarching question of who is wide receiver 1 for the Texans. For me, not really much of a question. It's Nico Collins, who had just an absolute breakout season last year as a true number 1 wide receiver, frankly. He was so impressive. And with Nico Collins, he's always had the traits. 6'4", 215 pounds, but not just the size, like pretty good speed and really good movement skills for a guy his size. That was kind of his selling point as a prospect because he really underproduced at Michigan and hasn't really had the quarterback play to produce here in Houston. But as soon as he gets good quarterback play, bam, there he is. There's Nico Collins, an absolute slam dunk of a 3rd-round pick, now turned number 1 wide receiver. And the main reason I think he's the number 1 here is, well, for one, he's the one guy that run blocks between Diggs and Dell, and this team does still want to run the football, so he's just going to always be out there at all times, whether it's 12 personnel or whatever. But much more than that, he is the guy that just has an exceptional chemistry with C.J. Stroud. And I talked a little bit about it in terms of the perfect mesh of skill sets where he's running these in-breakers and C.J. Stroud puts it right on the money where his run after catch is really underrated for a bigger wide receiver. You know, this isn't Mike Evans or T. Higgins at this size that just don't really offer much after the catch. Nico Collins has uniquely quick feet and good instincts after the catch. So we already kind of mentioned that, but he just has this really special overall chemistry with C.J. Stroud in the passing game in really 2 areas. Number 1, it's that kind of automatic play action, suck in the linebackers, and then Nico Collins is there on the dig. And he is as good at running dig routes, well, I can't say as anybody in the league, but he's really freaking good at running dig routes. So he's always going to be there. No contact or, different mesh points or anything is going to slow him down from working through contact and tough coverage to get to his landmarks. CJ Stroud can turn his head around in play action, trust that Nico's going to be there, and let it ride. And even if the coverage is pretty good on Nico Collins, if that corner jumps it or he has tight man-to-man coverage, Nico is really good at working back towards CJ Stroud, winning that angle and boxing out the corner. And as long as that ball is accurately thrown into the right spot, that throw is going to be automatic. And to me, that is like the staple of the Texans passing game in 2023, that just because they signed Stephon Diggs, that's not going to go anywhere. And I don't think Diggs is really going to take that throw away from Stroud and Collins. But the other area that chemistry shows up is in scramble drill. They just had a unique mind melt when Stroud would start to break out of the pocket and enter scramble drill. Nico Collins was just on the same page with him, would work with him to slide into the open spots in zones, present himself to Stroud, and is obviously a nice big target to throw the ball to as well. So to me, he is the feature of this offense and is really the guy I'm targeting in any sort of fantasy football format. And honestly, I think, the arrow could only be pointing up on Nico Collins in terms of his standing as a wide receiver in the NFL. I think last year he played like a top 5 wide receiver. No one would put him in their top 5 wide receiver rankings, though, because it was just the 1 year. If he continues to prove that that's who he is, there's no reason Nico Collins can't be, a true alpha number 1 type of wide receiver in the NFL. And the contract they gave him would then turn into a bargain because he's like $10 million less than some of these other wide receivers getting $35 million. Really, really nice piece for this Texans team. But then they go and get Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs, for me, gets that up and down yellow arrow where it's a little harder to know necessarily how to rate him on this Texans team and he himself moving forward. But it just comes down to what version of Stephon Diggs are we going to get here? His efficiency did drop off last season, and specifically dropped off in the second half of the season where he was just, I'm not going to say he was average. He was still pretty good, but he was nowhere near that, elite wide receiver that he has been for a few years in Buffalo. And when you're talking about a guy now that is 31 years old, showing signs of regression, quite possibly, and is quite loud about wanting the football, there's a reason that the Bills were somewhat comfortable just moving on from him at this point in his career. And I'm actually going to go a step further and say that I don't know that this is just by default going to be all rainbows and butterflies. If Diggs is what he was in the second half of last season, he's probably this team's wide receiver 3. But if he still thinks he's an alpha and sees Tank Dell and Nico Collins getting all these targets, is he a guy that's going to make some noise about that? Is that then going to lead to C.J. Stroud as a young quarterback trying to cater to him and throw off the rhythm of things? Does it cause some frustration and a lack of focus in the locker room? I'm not going to sit here and pound the table and tell you that that's what's definitely going to happen, but do I think that's a possibility for this team? Yes. But on the complete flip side of this, is it possible that he was just dealing with some lingering issues and is rejuvenated coming to Houston and is going to be freaking awesome, and this is the best wide receiver trio in the league with him kind of returning to form for another year or two? Sure, I think that's in the cards as well. So I'm not trying to be overly negative, but I just don't necessarily know which direction this is going to go. Regardless, though, he's an exciting addition. He does give them something that they don't necessarily have from a skill set perspective. In theory, if he is full go, he's a really nice complement to this group where Nico is running those digs. He's their big body guy. C.J. Stroud's trusted target. Diggs can be your sort of Z route runner, a little bit of a vertical threat, but work the sidelines, really run the entire route tree, be that sort of separator, route runner piece for this receiving group. And then that's a good transition to Tank Dell, who can be the juice in this group. And Tank is really exciting, man. His college tape was some of the most fun wide receiver college tape that I've watched in recent years. At Houston, he was just uncoverable. And he's kind of opened my eyes at least a little bit in the sense that, coming out, I was worried on if he could beat press coverage. And to be fair, Slowick does a good job putting him in motion and playing him off the line, so he's not seeing a ton of press coverage, but he certainly is not a guy that struggles to get past that sort of first line of defense in the secondary, like a lot of smaller wide receivers can struggle with. When you're 165 pounds, if a DB can get their hands on you, they can very quickly stunt your acceleration and any sort of progress you've made towards getting open on the back end, and oftentimes can keep their hands on you and continue to bump with you down the field and prevent you from separating. But in Tank Dell's case, he has a truly elite combination of acceleration, agility being foot speed, and change of direction. And I don't just throw elite around willy-nilly. Like, if we're talking about a Madden roster here, Tank Dell would have like 98 plus for me in terms of acceleration, agility, and change of direction. And when he has that, it doesn't always matter that he's 165 pounds because he can just teleport around dudes. And if you try to press him at the line of scrimmage, he's got good technique, but his foot speed just makes him really tough to get your hands on him. And if you miss on that strike, he's gone. He's past you. And then he also has good speed to separate down the field as a vertical threat and somehow manages to make like really tough catches down the field too. He is always going to have his catch radius and his frame working against him at times, but he'll attack the football. He's got good ball skills. They're just going to be capped a little bit because of his size. But we talked as well about how pairing him with C.J. Stroud is such a big deal. He's a very unique player. And for that reason, I don't really know where the ceiling stops on Tank Dell. I think what we saw from his rookie tape is something like a Deontay Johnson, where he's not the biggest guy, not even necessarily the fastest guy, but is a premium separator and an awesome weapon to have as a number 2, because he's just going to be open more often than not. But Could I see him being maybe like something like a poor man's Tyreek Hill, where he's undersized but has really good ball skills relative to his size, can actually make more tough catches than you expect, and also just be one of the best separators in the league? I'm not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill, but can he be a poor man's Tyreek Hill and become like maybe one of the better number 2 wide receivers in the league? I'm not really ready to dismiss that either. I think he has shown on the film that his size is really not going to deter him from accomplishing much at all. Honestly, the one thing that might be holding him back is, can he stay healthy? He is tiny, and he hurt himself run blocking last year, which if he's going to be a legit number 2, they're going to continue to ask him to do some of that stuff. That's honestly maybe the one question on Tank Dell. But hopefully he can stay healthy. And, I mean, my Lord, this could be the best wide receiver trio in the league this year quite easily. So exciting stuff there with those 3. And the Texans honestly have some of the best width and depth in their weapons as well. You have a very capable starting tight end in Dalton Schultz. Definitely falls in line with your good quality possession tight end. He's above average as a blocker, secure hands, nice after the catch. Really nice to have him here. They don't quite have the luxury of getting him on what was a massive underpay in free agency. A good job by this front office to knife him in there last year on like a 1-year, $7 million contract. They had to pay up a little bit more this year, 3 years, $36 million, but he's worth it. He's really good, balanced starting tight end. I'd call him top 15 or so in the league. And then Joe Mixon. I do think Joe Mixon has lost a lot of juice from his old self. We'll talk more about that in the run game breakdown, but has still continued to be a productive receiving back. He's a good pass protector, really good screen threat, good instincts out in space. Just his ability to make guys miss and his overall speed has, I think, definitely fallen off, but still a very nice, useful running back weapon for what he is. So that might go down as some of the width with the starters, but the depth is pretty crazy, man. I mean, you got Robert Woods and Noah Brown would probably be starters for a handful of teams in the league. Just at this point, solid possession receivers, really. Not going to give you much juice if you need them for an extended period of time, but can be reliable if any of these guys go down for a week or two. You still have John Mechie, was a second-round pick 3 years ago. Derailed from his cancer diagnosis and has just been kind of buried here at this point. I still believe in John Mechie. He's been kind of average when they've given him looks, so we'll see what year 3 holds for him. Xavier Hutchinson, kind of balling out in the preseason. A lot of good reports on him from camp. I just, one of these players that I just have a good gut feeling about, Xavier Hutchinson, to be a nice player. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but he just understands the position. He's crafty, physical, good hands, smart player. Not a great athlete. That's why he fell in the draft, but I do kind of find myself liking him. Then they trade for Ben Skoranek as well. I don't know if he's going to have room to make this team, but I mean, he's kind of like a blocking specialist of a wide receiver, and they might have a specific use for him in some of their, run forward formations. And if he's going to make the team, it's like, man, is this team going to keep 8 wide receivers? It might happen. I mean, hell, even Steven Sims and Quintez Cephas have made some plays in the league. So they are teaming with wide receiver talent here. Tight end depth is pretty good too. Brevin Jordan is definitely in that F tight end mold in a Shanahan system, that sort of Jonnu Smith role where he's not really going to project well as like a full-time starter, but for 12 personnel, a wing player that can get lost on play action, block on the edge against smaller linebackers and safeties and slot corners, very sound fit for that role in this offense. They do draft Cade Stover, a potential long-term Dalton Schultz replacement, nice possession tight end prospect. Tegan Quitoriano is a good blocking guy. They definitely like him for when they want to go, play action out of 12 personnel and keep those tight ends in the block and just have 3 wide receivers out running plays. I think they like what Quitoriano does in those plays, so probably keeping all 4 of those tight ends there. And then not a ton to add in terms of running back depth. No one that really pops for me to round out the group of weapons. Obviously a huge asset for this football team. A point of emphasis if you're talking about C.J. Stroud ascending the quarterback ranks, having a monster season, and even beyond that, like playoff success, them being able to sling the rock and beat you in any different type of way with these weapons is again just a big selling point for this team. But then you get to the running backs in the actual running game here. They don't grade out great, just kind of average for me. A B- grade, 15th to 19th. I want to like Joe Mixon, at least based on the tape, more than I have found myself liking him over the last couple of years. I just do see a guy that the injuries and the workload has piled up on him. The Bengals, who needed a running back, were prepared to cut him, and then the Texans were like, yeah, we'll throw you a 7th-round pick to make sure we get him. But he's big. He's tough. I think his vision's pretty good. He's nice in the receiving game. He doesn't fumble. He's like a good starting running back still. But the tough reality on Mixon is not only does the tape show a lack of juice and explosiveness from what he used to be, but the stats are not great on him either. He was last year 30th out of 35 eligible running backs in both elusive rating by PFF, which basically takes into account how often you're forcing missed tackles. So 30th out of 35 there, and 30th out of 35 in breakaway percentage. How often are you creating chunk explosive runs once you get to the second level? Very much towards the bottom of the league there. But it wasn't just last year. 2022, he was 31st out of 32 in elusive rating and 25th out of 32 in breakaway percentage. So they've leaned on him. He's mostly stayed healthy, and his final numbers look okay. But his efficiency just hasn't been anything spectacular. So it's fine to acquire him. Gives you a little bit more size and physicality than what they had in Devin Singletary. But I also don't think it's like a massive upgrade either. And he's much closer to a name than a dynamic impact on the run game at this point. And then you got Dameon Pierce. It's been a tough fall off for Pierce. And I wish I could say after watching the film it was just bad run blocking that led to his putrid 2.8 yards per carry last year. But unfortunately, that just wasn't always the case. Now, I'm not going to say the run blocking did him any favors, but he did look kind of slow to me. Slower than I remember in his rookie year where he was pretty good. And at Florida, this is a guy that has been banged up quite a bit. But also the vision was just really frustrating on him. Not necessarily being like bounce heavy, but just not very decisive and committal. And when your run blocking is already kind of shaky, you're just going to find yourself getting tackled in the backfield most of the time. And then they go to Devin Singletary, and they go from 2.8 yards a carry on Dameon Pierce to 4.1 on Singletary. And it's not like Singletary's a monster, but I think that gap in vision and lateral agility to hit a hole and change lanes very much showed. Still okay at bouncing off of tackles, and I wish the best for him, but I don't think they have big expectations for Dameon Pierce, and I ultimately think he's just an okay RB2. So you can kind of see where they come in 15th to 19th. I'm not saying it's a bad room, but definitely more name value than actual like high-end running back play here. And then in terms of depth, they do still list Dare Ogunbowale as the third string. He is definitely a receiving specialist, a pass block specialist. They did sign Cam Akers from Minnesota. He looked like he had some juice still in the tank in that preseason game. It's just preseason, but we know he's a talented back. Could he vie for that RB2 spot behind Dameon Pierce? Might not be a bad spot for Cam Akers to settle in if he could just stay healthy in a reduced role. Maybe. They did draft Jawar Jordan in the 6th round. You could argue he had shades of a Devin Singletary type of back where he just understands the position, but from a physical tool standpoint, I mean, he's tiny and slow. It's valiant that he held off the very physically gifted Isaac Guerendo for the starting job at Louisville. That's about the nicest thing I can say about him. I just didn't see much from him. And then J.J. Taylor's been kind of a scat back vying for roster spots for a few years now. So I think it's an okay running back room, specifically with Joe Mixon. I do think you're going to get a lot less of those, runs that go nowhere on 1st and 2nd down. A lot less C.J. Stroud having to drop back on 3rd and 10 because the run game just didn't work. I think you'll get a lot more 4 and 5 yard runs, but I also don't think you're going to put the fear of God in teams with this running back room either. And then in terms of the QB run multiplier, right in line with those teams that, they'll mix in a read option once every week or two just to keep teams honest for when they run inside zone out of shotgun. You have to account for that backside, QB keeper, but they don't want to expose Stroud to unnecessary hits, and it's not like he's a dynamic runner of the football either. But they do get a slight bump from it. But let's move on and talk about the offensive line. It's a group that has questions, but they are a pretty good pass blocking unit, and that showed up last year as well, even if they have some moving pieces now. So they do rank 10th to 14th in pass blocking. They're pretty solid there, but they are dead last in run blocking, which anybody that watched the Texans last year shouldn't come as a huge surprise based on the film last year and the fact that they didn't do too much to this group. But let's go left to right. You do have Laramie Tunsil. Not a ton to really say about him. He's been an elite pass-protecting left tackle for a long time now, and he's just missing a little something as a run blocker. He's not horrible there. He's got adequate play strength, adequate tenacity, adequate athleticism moving forward. But he's much more making his money because he's a guy that you can slide the line away from him, leave him on an island, and essentially just for the most part, just don't have to worry about him. So he's obviously a big contributor to them ranking in the top half of the league for pass blocking, because the rest of this group is just nothing special and even has some pretty big question marks. Kenyon Green now in year 3, first-round pick, a high first-round pick. I think he was, off the top of my head, like the 15th overall pick out of Texas A&M. And his rookie season was brutal, man. He looked like a bust in his first year, but you can't just write off offensive linemen after 1 year. And he missed a big year in his growth last year. So this is effectively his second season to show us what kind of growth he has. But his technique and his film was just all over the map. And because he isn't always playing as fast as he can, he second guesses assignments, he's late with his hands. He's not even as good in the run game as you would think for a guy that is really strong and was drafted off of some really nice traits in the first round. So he's got a first-round pedigree, but that's about the only nice thing you can say about Kenyon Green. They seem like they want to start him at left guard and see what he can do, and only time will tell on him, frankly. But then at center, Juice Scruggs, I'm just not a big Juice Scruggs guy. I was really trying to see it watching this Texans film, and I thought he was overdrafted in the second round. I had play strength concerns on him. Didn't love his pass protection, his anchor. Didn't think he could really displace guys or stick too much in the run game. He is a good athlete for wide zone run blocking, so I see why they like him for that. But outside of sealing a D tackle in wide zone, which is something they'll ask him to do, and he'll be useful in those roles. Outside of that, I just don't really like what you're getting from him. It is year 2. They really like him. I do put the up arrow on him, but it's not a guarantee that he improves either. So center and left guard are massive question marks for this overall Texans team. You're a little more stable at right guard and right tackle, but not locked down. You have Shaq Mason, still a nice player. He has now surpassed over 10,000 snaps played in his career, which is just highly commendable. But his overall efficiency in both phases has taken a step down over the last few years. So he is only 31. It's just insane that he's already played as much as he has. You just don't see these types of numbers, and he just hasn't really missed much time. So you don't think the fall-off's going to be steep, but he was more just like solid for Houston last year. He did take his losses and wasn't some dynamic run blocker either, but you're not really worried about him either. Titus Howard now is going to go back to right tackle. I do feel bad for him because they just keep sticking him at guard where he clearly isn't comfortable. He hasn't been able to get that continuity. He's already a guy that just entered the league with bad technique and had so much to learn. I don't think they've done him any favors by moving him all over the offensive line. But in 2022, he started most of his games at right tackle and played pretty well. And then they paid him a pretty massive contract extension, presumably to be their franchise right tackle, projecting a little bit of growth still from what he had been. And then he just didn't get to play tackle last year. So you got to kind of rewind the clock, do some mental gymnastics, and remember that the arrow was pointing up on him a year ago. But This hasn't been pretty, and they spent a second-round pick on Blake Fisher. I don't know that they're really in on Titus Howard as the future right tackle of this team. Like, I do think it's kind of weird that even if he was struggling at guard, they didn't put him back at tackle. They stuck with George Fant. I get that that was, in their minds, the best version of their offensive line. I'm not necessarily being critical of it, but it's not like he was anything other than bad at guard. And if you don't think it's a significant upgrade to put the guy you're paying $19 million in there ahead of George Fant, who they picked up off the chopping block, it's just kind of weird. So it's hard to say exactly which direction this is going to go. His contract could be a bit of an eyesore here if he doesn't bounce back at right tackle here, because he's got I think still has $23 million in dead cap over the next 2 years, and they have decent void years on the books for 2028. So they're paying the price, and hopefully they can get a franchise right tackle back in him. But he's just doesn't have great play strength. He's been a very bad run blocker really throughout his time in Houston. That shows up with his anchor and pass pro as well. He's got decent feet, decent hands, so he doesn't suck in pass protection. He's actually kind of good if you're just looking at the 2022 tape. But I do put that yellow up and down arrow on him because, again, a year ago we had the arrow pointing up, but could go in the wrong direction here too based on kind of how bad he was last year. And they drafted Blake Fisher in the second round. That's not a small investment. I think they're looking at this tackle duo and saying, okay, Laramie Tunsil's getting up there in age, and we don't necessarily know what we're getting in Titus Howard, and worst case scenario, maybe Blake Fisher can be a guard for us. I like Blake Fisher. I didn't see him necessarily the highest upside guy, but was just a dude that checked a lot of boxes. I thought his technique was solid for a 21-year-old dude out of Notre Dame that obviously just pumps out high character, high quality offensive linemen. People tell you don't scout the helmet, but when it comes to Notre Dame, Michigan, a couple of programs and offensive linemen, you kind of scout the helmet a little bit because there's just an endless list of dudes that at least turn into solid players out of those programs. They teach it right there, and they recruit the right types of dudes there. So I think it was a good kind of second-round pick to find either a long-term right tackle or an answer at guard if Kenyon Green struggles. But, he's just very balanced in terms of size, play strength, technique, run blocking, pass blocking, all across the board. Wasn't hyper efficient, but wasn't bad either. So I liked him. I thought he was a sleeper in a very good tackle class. But they do have Charlie Heck as tackle depth. He's played. I think he's okay-ish as a swing tackle. They also signed Cam Irving, so he's played a lot. They're pretty well equipped to put a tackle in there for a game or two and hope for decent tackle play. But then you look at the interior depth, and that's where you have Kendrick Green. And I get it. They like Juice Scruggs. They drafted him higher, but from everything I've seen going back to college and the 3 games that we got from Kendrick Green before he got hurt last year, I do think he's a better player. I don't know. In our last deep dive, I threw that out there about who was it? Cooper Beebe starting over Brock Hoffman, and then the next day they said he's taking reps with the ones. We'll see how this plays out, but for me, I'd be rolling with Kendrick Green for going the draft, price a little bit on Juice Scruggs, but time will tell. I think he brings all the athleticism with a little bit more it factor in the run game and another extra year of development and experience. But, he's an option if either of these guys, Kenyon Green or Juice Scruggs, really struggle. He's a nice backup plan, and I actually think could play pretty well here. So between him and Blake Fisher, you do have some nice, basically, prospects to throw in there if some of these bigger question marks do struggle. So that does raise the technical floor of this group, or at least the probability that you can sort through this and get a good offensive line by season's end. Not a ton of other depth that I'm really going to highlight. Jarrett Patterson has started some games. Pretty similar to Juice Scruggs. Athletic, undersized center. Lacks play strength. They did sign Chris Reed as well. A little more of a veteran presence here. He was okay the last time he was starting in Indianapolis. Physical dude out of Minnesota State. Farm boy strength, if you will. Got to shout out my Minnesotans where I can. But overall, they do rank as my 22nd to 23rd offensive line. It's just not a huge strength for this team. As we saw last year, though, they do protect these guys with the scheme, with a heavy dose of play action. They keep tight ends into block, make sure rushers are focused on the run instead of getting upfield, creating those moving pockets. These Shanahan systems have proven to be very efficient at protecting an offensive line that can have some weak links on it. So you are a little bit less worried about it on this Texans team than you might be on a team that is just, dropping back out of shotgun 45 times a game. But when they do get into those situations and you have to have it 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, getting after the quarterback specifically over that center and left guard spot is going to be a weakness on this offense that otherwise doesn't really exist. That's where you can get these guys. And it's a little bit easier as well to get them into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 because the run blocking is just abysmal. You have 3, borderline liabilities at Kenyon Green, Juice Scruggs, and Titus Howard. And your best pieces, Laramie Tunsil and Shaq Mason, are just good, above average, but nothing special. And we can kind of continue this and tie up the rest of the offense. The running backs are nothing special. You don't have some dynamic quarterback run multiplier. You have a coach that hasn't really proven to be able to get the run game going to this point in his young career. They rank 29th for me in run game. So this is a really nice offense, but they do have ways you can slow them down by forcing them into deeper drop back pass situations via their poor run game and then attacking them up the middle of the interior of the offensive line. But that's, one chink in the armor in what is otherwise a really nice, well-oiled machine. They do come out as my 11th overall offense and 5th in passing game, despite the weaknesses on the interior of that offensive line. And man, if you get some of those younger pieces on the interior to step up, make sure that's not really a weakness. Good luck stopping this Texans offense. But let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. A lot of excitement here as well, but likewise, there's some chinks in the armor on this side of the ball too. But let's start with the defensive line. It's a really high-ranking group. They come in grouped 6th to 8th for overall defensive line, 4th to 8th for pass rush, way up towards the top of the league in terms of getting after the quarterback. And then in that kind of just solid cluster, 15th to 23rd for D-line run defense. Now, they are unique in the sense that they might have the best run defending edge duo in the league and are really squishy on the inside. So kind of a unique group to rank for D-line run defense. Ultimately, they do settle in, again, kind of average there because of that. But let's break down this edge group, and then we'll work our way inside here. I do want to start with Danielle Hunter, who, with all due respect to Will Anderson and his trajectory, I do think Danielle Hunter is the best edge guy here and is their number one, at least for now. I think they think the world of Will Anderson and expect him to someday get there, but realize, hey, let's go for it with Stroud on a rookie contract. We can work in a Danielle Hunter, who is a player that rarely hits free agency, a legit number one edge rusher that's not 34 years old like Von Miller was. Hell, he's not even 30 yet. Turns 30 in the middle of the season. But why wait around for Will Anderson to be that 80 pressure, 15 sack guy when we can just sign Danielle Hunter, make sure we have that guy, have that legit number one, and then Will Anderson, if all, in a worst case scenario, if he is what he was last year as a really nice number two, 60 pressures, double-digit sacks, a high-end number two, great. We're locked and loaded. But, hey, if Will Anderson takes another step up, continues to show why he was that blue-chip edge rush prospect that they traded up to go get to make kind of the face of this defense, opposite of C.J. Stroud, hey, fantastic. We've got, maybe the best edge rush duo in the league if that happens. Really, really nice signing to go get Danielle Hunter. And as a Packers fan, he to this day still puts the fear of God in me. He's actually very similar to Rashawn Gary, ironically, where, do you wish he had a little bit more polish on his game, more counter moves and finesse to take that last step in his development towards being like a Myles Garrett type of dude with his traits? Yeah, that would be great, but he also doesn't need it because he's just so explosive, has such great length, so much power, and enough speed to threaten to the edge and quickness to win on inside moves as well. Needless to say, plenty of reason to be super excited about Hunter coming in and what he could do for this defense. And then you get to Will Anderson. We talked about him a little bit, but he was everything you could have hoped for a rookie edge rusher. These guys don't always hit the ground running. It's a big jump going from working college tackles to working NFL tackles, but Will Anderson made that jump just fine. And honestly, it's not the biggest surprise that he stepped in and was effective so early, because when you go back to what he was as a prospect, he was a little different than a lot of these like top 2-3 blue chip edge rush prospects, in the sense that he really wasn't like this physical elite specimen. Chase Young, Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, Trayvon Walker, obviously those guys have had mixed results, but all those guys were drafted off of length, size, strength, theoretical elite upsides. Will Anderson was like, okay, he's really quick, he's compact and strong for his size, he's got good bend. It's not that he didn't have high-end traits, but he definitely was not like elite physical specimen Will Anderson. But because of that, he has had to carve out more of a skill set for how he wins as a rusher. And that helped him translate right away. But now I think you can say, with that context, okay, Will Anderson is established. He is at least a really high-end number 2 rusher, which I think based on the production and the film is what he showed last year. And a number 2 rusher, by the way, that is awesome against the run, by the way. So that raises that floor even higher. He does stuff that a lot of the sort of top 10 edge rushers just don't do on early downs. He's got crazy instincts, insane lateral agility to work in and around blocks, and really good tackling consistency as well, just as so many Alabama defenders have coming into the NFL. But now I'm excited to see what that next evolution in Will Anderson's game might look like. As I mentioned, he just doesn't have the typical traits that you would talk about from a blue chip edge prospect, and the typical traits that we do see in the majority of those sort of top 10 number 1 edge rusher types of dudes. Like if you break down the list of the top 10 edge rushers in the league, I would say 8 out of 10 are much, at least somewhat closer to Danielle Hunter in terms of length, speed, power type of stuff. But I will say there's 2 names I would put inside the top 10 of edge rushers in the league that present a bit of a pathway for Will Anderson to still be a legit one and maybe even into that elite tier. I would say the 2 guys that you can kind of project the skill set for with Will Anderson would be TJ Watt and Aiden Hutchinson. Neither of those players have that typical speed, length, power profile. But both of those dudes have been able to become number 1 guys because of incredible foot speed and bend, which Will Anderson again does have, and just an incredible finesse pass rushing skill set. Spins, swims, counters, you name it. And when it comes to Will Anderson, I will say he's just not quite there yet, right? The majority of his wins are coming on swipes, speed rushing to the corner with his bend. He does have a bull rush. It's a good, not great bull rush, which I think is where his bull rush will probably settle in the NFL. I just don't think elite raw power is in his wheelhouse. And he wins late with a lot of, high effort pursuit stuff. That's great. That's what's gotten him to being a really high end number 2. But if he wants to take that next step, which I think is possible for him, it's honestly going to be something similar to what Aiden Hutchinson did in year 2, where he's really unlocking that pass rushing tool belt, showing off a more advanced, set of moves and winning in that way. So I'm really excited to see it. But again, even if he doesn't take that step this year, they're still sitting pretty, man. You have a 1 in Danielle Hunter, and you have a really high end 2 in Will Anderson. So that's the core of why this is ranked as a top 8 pass rush now. But if he takes that leap in year 2, look the hell out, because these guys are going to swarm opposing quarterbacks, especially after Danico Autry gets off of his 6-game PED suspension. And this was a nice signing, man. Autry has bounced between being an interior player and an edge player. He's been one of those hybrid dudes that, depending on the system he's in, you're going to list him either as an edge or an interior player. I do definitely think in this system, he is going to be an interior player for the most part. A lot of 3-tech, a lot of 4-eye, getting in between the tackle and the guard, basically, and being that penetrator. That's what he is. He's got great length, power, an awesome first step, and a couple different moves that he'll break out to get past guys. And he's 34 years old, but he really hasn't shown signs of slowing down. And look, I'm not endorsing anybody cheats and breaks the rules to get a leg up on your competition by any stretch of the imagination, but he has already done that. He's going to face a 6-game suspension. And if that was a little bit of a strategic approach from him to say, hey, I will accept a 6-game suspension so that I can prolong my career, maintain my athleticism at 34 years old, if we're projecting how he's going to be for this Texans team, I think he's going to be pretty damn good when he comes back from that suspension. Now, he is undersized from a run defense perspective. You're back to that conversation about, all right, he can splash into the backfield. He's a good fit in this system for everything we talked about with D'Amico Ryans, how they like to slant these guys, just cause chaos. Don't necessarily worry all the time about taking on double teams and holding your own at the line. That's not what Danico Autry is going to be ever, and certainly not for them this year, but he can still make some plays and get some defensive stops against the run as well. But until he comes back, this interior is one of the worst interior D-lines in the league. You do have Lorenzo Fatukasi next to him. He also gets that up and down yellow arrow. Hard to know exactly what we're going to get from him. Look, the last time he played in a Robert Saleh-inspired defense, which this is in Houston, he was really good. Good enough to earn a 3-year, $33 million contract in Jacksonville, something like that. A really nice, highly paid free agent, a dude that stopped the run, had size, but also could penetrate, create some push as a pass rusher, and be a nice two-way player and a 3-down player. He just wasn't that for the Jags. They very quickly kind of moved on from him. After a couple of years, he dealt with injuries, and the Texans were able to get him for pretty cheap here. So he's a nice dart throw to take. You're putting him back in the system that worked for him early in his career. But that's not to say it's a guarantee that he just goes back to that guy. If he does, that's a brilliant signing here. And he could help this sort of D-line, but especially the run defense kind of surprise here, because he's kind of the guy that would be someone that can take on double teams, actually be a bit of a cement wall at the line of scrimmage, as opposed to guys like Autry and Mario Edwards. But he also could just not be very good as he was in Jacksonville. So we'll see there. But they're going to have to count on guys like Mario Edwards, who, if you're going to get a 6-game suspension for Danico Autry and then say, all right, who else is out there that can play that role as that tweener end in this system for 6 weeks until Autry gets back and then settle in as a really nice backup in that role? Mario Edwards was a really nice signing for this front office. He's not a full-on starter or anything like that, but he's been a nice player as a hybrid end in more 3-4 types of systems in Tennessee and Seattle the last couple of years. But just take everything we said about Danico Autry and just turn down the dial a little bit. And he's probably going to make some plays in the first 6 weeks of the season while he is starting, essentially. Then you got Tim Settle. He's another nice dart throw at a guy I like, at least. And it's not like they gave him nothing. I think it was a 2-year, $6 million contract. So that's like rotational, first man in type of defensive tackle money. He is the other guy that's going to provide some size to this defensive line. He's another sort of insurance policy if Fatukasi can't stay healthy or if he just isn't very good. Settle's a nice balanced player. He's got light feet for a bigger guy, but play strength just has never really quite gotten there. Consistency has just been a little bit all over the board on him. But a nice backup nonetheless. You do have Khalil Davis, who broke out in a bit of a way last year for the Texans. A nice pickup for Houston. Davis, he was a hyper athlete coming out of Nebraska, but just super raw. and has never really done anything in the NFL in the first, 4 years of his career. Up until last year, he played a rotational role and started to put that athleticism to the test under DeMeco Ryans and this system that, again, can make the most out of athletes, especially on the interior. So, he'll still rotate and maybe make some splash plays. They also drafted Marcus Harris in the 7th round, right in line with what we keep saying. He's a lighter player, plays at about 295 pounds, but quick feet, made some plays at Auburn. I didn't hate that at all as a 7th round pick. Definitely thought he was draftable. Kurt Hinish has gotten some time for this team, but hasn't looked very good. And McTelvin Agim, another guy that kind of similar to the Khalil Davis signing last year. A lot of athleticism, hasn't done much to this point in his career, but maybe in this system he could work. So they have a lot of bodies, but do they have any real impact players other than Danico Autry? No. And even Autry is let's just call him a one-track mind in the sense that he's not a traditional run-stopping defensive tackle. And that, of course, drags down specifically like the run defense aspect of this front. But we do have to talk about the edge depth as well. They do have Derek Barnett back here. Really nice pickup mid-season for them. The Eagles just let him go. They released him. Former first-round pick that's never really been straight up bad. He just hasn't lived up to his first-round pedigree. And he was a dude that when he got drafted, it was like, he doesn't really have the physical tools of a first-round edge. Kind of in line in many ways with like a Clelin Ferrell, for example. Nice college player, but the traits didn't help him sustain that level of success in the NFL. But Houston's like, he doesn't suck. Let's pick him up. And he played really well for Houston. He actually had some really good games as a pass rusher as well, but really came in and defended the run well as a first guy off the bench type of dude. And I was surprised nobody gave him more money in free agency. Like, not to throw shade at Commanders fans, but like Dorrance Armstrong for 3 years, $33 million versus Derek Barnett to Houston for 1 year, $2 million. Like, make the math make sense there. So for him to just come back on a vet minimum, that's a great reacquisition for the Texans. They still have Jerry Hughes as well, who really didn't suck at his age. He's like 83 years old now, but can still get you some pass rush wins. Capable play off the bench. They're really deep at edge. I have really no questions with that edge room. They draft Solomon Byrd in the 7th round. I'm going to defer to our interview with Brett where he talks about Byrd. And then Dylan Horton. Hopefully he can heal up. Diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He's on the non-football injury list. There's some talk that he might be able to get back out there this year. I liked Horton as a 4th-round pick. He's a big-bodied dude. I think if Barnett has another nice year and then gets paid some money next year, I think Horton could kind of settle in as that nice, balanced first guy off the bench type of edge. Probably not expecting much from him this year, though. And that rounds out your defensive line. Obviously, projecting this as a strength for this Texans team and defense this season. But let's talk about the second level with this really new-look linebacking group. It's going to be Azeez Al-Shaair, who they signed in free agency, and Christian Harris is now projected to basically be elevated to more of a starting role. He did play a good bit last year, but was just kind of in the mix with a motley crew of a bunch of different linebackers last year. Now, this duo is more of a projection at this point in time. They come in as my 25th to 27th ranked overall linebacking core with a nice C+ grade in coverage that gets them in that middle cluster, 11th to 20th. Groups that are solid but kind of indistinguishable in terms of the impact from the coverage unit. But definitely some areas for concern in terms of run defense that come in towards the bottom, 26th to 31st. It's not to say that that can't improve, but this group does have a lot to prove, really. Specifically in the case of Christian Harris, but even Azeez Al-Shaair, I would say they're paying him off of a projection, and because he played for DeMeco in San Francisco, he really emerged as a starting caliber player for Tennessee last year. It was his first year as a starter. He was obviously behind Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw in San Francisco, takes kind of a 1-year prove-it deal as a starter, and played well for Tennessee. I'm not going to say he balled out and established himself as a star linebacker, but he definitely came out, defended the run specifically very well, a heat-seeking missile. You can see why DeMeco Ryans likes him and his personality, a nose for the football, an aggressive player, pretty smart guy, some length to get off of blocks, and loves to hit. But with that said, I would say he can get over-aggressive at times, can blow his lane, and does have a little bit of a higher missed tackle percentage, 12.3%. Not horrible, but if you want him to be a star run defender and really live up to the contract they gave him, you want to see that, come up 4 or 5% in terms of consistently getting guys to the ground. But especially where he has a lot to prove is in coverage. He just, to this point in his career, I don't think has been asked to do too much in coverage. There just hasn't been a lot of ball production. Was definitely a guy that teams didn't have any trouble targeting in Tennessee. So he's a nice player. I don't hate the contract. And he's at about that point in his career, year 6, but year 2 as a starter, really, where you can say, all right, things are going to really start to click, especially with a coach like DeMeco Ryans. So could be poised for a breakout season. It's just we can't rank him all that high when he's been a nice player, but not some star. So we'll see how that ages and how this contract ages for them, and really how the decision to go with him over Blake Cashman, who was incredible last season, ages. I don't think that's going to make or break this team's defense, but I certainly don't think it's an area where they're guaranteed to be better than they were last year, if that makes sense. Especially with Christian Harris out there more now. And I like Christian Harris, and I like his projection. Thought he was just fine as a third-round investment. And from a coverage perspective, I think he's already shown more than Azeez Al-Shaair ever has. But that's not a huge surprise. I mean, he was, I think, a high school safety, played linebacker for Alabama, and his coverage tape is really fun. He's got like legit 4.4 speed. He essentially is a safety. He's more athletic than I think a lot of strong safeties in the league, and he's about as big as a lot of strong safeties in the league. Plays at about 6'1", 225 pounds, soaking wet. And there's obvious trade-offs to that. I mean, his coverage looks pretty damn good. He projects as maybe something like a prime Deion Jones, where he is potentially going to be one of the better coverage linebackers in the league. Beautiful interception against Cleveland. And there was a cool clip where you got to really see DeMeco Ryans coaching influence these young linebackers, especially in Christian Harris's case, where I don't have the link or anything, but I remember seeing it where DeMeco's like, they're going to do this, Flacco's going to look here, you're going to jump it, you're going to pick it, and that's exactly what happened. And when you have, one of the decade's better linebackers in DeMeco Ryans coaching you up, it gives you a little bit more confidence that that arrow is pointing up and you're going to get there. But from a run defense perspective, I just don't know, man. It shows on tape. Like, he gets detonated in between the tackles, really doesn't have the strength to get off blocks. He's basically always going to try to slip and slide in and around blocks, and that can work at times, but a lot of times that's going to mean you're just going exactly where the running back wants you to go, and you're taking yourself out of the play. From a tackling perspective, he's missed, 15% of his tackles both years. That's really, really bad. Doesn't really have the play strength to wrap up against bigger backs, and even like tight ends and stuff too. So there's deficiencies in his game, man, and really only time will tell how much DeMeco Ryans can kind of bridge that gap, how much Christian Harris can bridge the gap here. If he bulks up a little bit to help out the run defense side of things without losing too much in terms of coverage and all that, you are talking about a potentially special player here in year 3. He's only 23 years old, and this was always going to be kind of the trajectory on Christian Harris, was a 1 or 2 year development plan. So I'm excited for him to get this opportunity, but he is very much a wild card for this defense, especially when we are talking about a front that plays really light. They ask a lot of these linebackers to be nasty around the line of scrimmage, and I don't know if Christian Harris is fit for that. So he's obviously a big reason why they rank so low in terms of linebacker run defense. Now, the depth is nothing that really gets me excited, to be honest. Henry To'oTo'o, I think, was exactly what he was at Alabama. in year one here for Houston, where he's really smart, gets through his keys for a rookie linebacker. I thought he was just fine at that, but even in run defense, he just isn't athletic, and he's not the biggest guy. So from being smart and all that is great, but at the end of the day, you do got to get there and tackle a guy and get off a block. He's lacking the traits, and that especially shows up in coverage. Man, he's one of the stiffest linebackers that you would have seen play snaps in the league last year. And even if he knows what he's looking for, you can just pick on him all day in coverage. So I'm just not the biggest fan of his game, to be honest. Jake Hansen, probably pretty similar analysis. He's had some good snaps for the Texans. They like him as a backup. Neville Hewitt's played a lot in this league. Decent enough backup to have. They draft Jamal Hill, who's just, good process, I would say. I like drafting athletes at this position to just kind of stash and develop, especially if you have a linebacker coach in D'Amico Ryans, to develop these guys, but he's not really ready to play. Jacob Phillips, a flyer on someone that has failed in the league, but still youth and athleticism. It's, to be honest, it's just not the best group. The depth doesn't really get me excited. The two starters, though, I think could be nice if they can show more growth and get there. In theory, I think you do have a nice complementary skill set for what it's worth, where you do have someone that's going to thrive in this system in terms of, you got to be kind of a psycho to play linebacker in this system because of how they muddy things up front and just ask these guys to clean up. They think they're getting that in Azeez Al-Shaair, and then they have more of that rangy coverage player in Christian Harris. In theory, that duo provides some complementary skill sets. So we'll see where the linebacking group kind of ranks at season's end here. But then you get to the secondary, and look, there's some pieces I like, but there's undeniably some pretty major question marks here as well. This group has a lot to prove. They don't rank out that great in the secondary for me. They come in 24th to 28th. I think they can finish the year higher than that, but I don't know if they can finish that much higher than that. But a lot of the upside in this secondary does come with having Derek Stingley, who had an awesome second season. Feels so good to see good tape and see him mostly healthy for Houston, because the reality is his rookie season was just horrible. Missed a lot of time and just didn't look that good when he did play. Missed pretty much all of his 2021 season at LSU. 2020 was a COVID season, so they only played 7 games or something like that in a weird year. But then, of course, that freshman season at LSU to this day is one of the most dominant cornerback seasons you'll ever see from a college corner. And he was frankly drafted top 3 off of that freshman season. So heading into last year, it was man, I still love Derek Stingley, but we got to see something. And even last year, he missed 4 or 5 games. But at least when he played, it was all right, a deep, sigh, a sigh of relief. Okay, he's still Derek Stingley. He's still a freaking stud out there. But I'm just begging the football gods, please keep Derek Stingley healthy, because he is so fun when he's out there. And if he does stay healthy, I think in time he can get up to a point where you can very much live with the fact, I guess, that they took him over Sauce Gardner. I think time has passed. They certainly would take Sauce over Derek Stingley if they got a do-over. And it's kind of funny that they both play in the same system now, so it's a one-for-one comparison at this point moving forward, I think, especially now that Houston has a pass rush that can compare to the Jets. But, man, I think the arrow is just skyrocketing up for Derek Stingley. And they're really going to lean on him, man, as a do-it-all number 1 corner. There's nothing you can't do with Derek Stingley. He's an incredible athlete. He's got the size. Man-to-man, he can stay in your hip pocket, but he has just a rare instinct to know when the ball is coming, to get his head around, great ball skills. And he's got really good anticipation, lateral agility, closing speed when he's playing zone. Those instincts show to read the quarterback's eyes. And in so many games as the season went on, teams were mostly just not targeting him, or he was just straight up lockdown. Now, he's still, to this day, only played a little more than a season's worth of snaps through his first 2 years, 1,400 snaps in his career. Comparatively, someone like Sauce Gardner played 1,100 in his rookie season. So with that, I'm not quite ready to just come out and say he's an elite corner, but very quickly could get there if he's out there and playing like he did last year. So you do feel awesome about that and really where you're at with Stingley right now. The majority of the questions for this secondary outside of Stingley's health really come in with everybody else. And that's, of course, going to happen when you're starting a second-round corner with 4.6 speed in Kamari Lassiter. And that's not to say I don't like Kamari Lassiter. It's just the odds are against him from a physical skill set standpoint. But, man, I do like his tape, and if they deploy him correctly, they can put him in a spot where that lack of long speed just isn't going to hurt him too much. It probably, over the course of time, will hold him back from being some incredible all-pro type of corner, but can he settle in as a really nice number 2 corner opposite of Derek Stingley? Or maybe eventually carve out like a really nice slot role? I think so. And in the past, there have been corners where I like their tape, but they come out and run horrible times, and I drop them into being like a day 3 prospect. I like Kamari Lassiter's tape so much that I still kept him kind of in the range where Houston ended up taking him as like a second, third round prospect. He's just so smart. He's so quick. His technique is so outstanding. He clearly understands that he's not that fast and has overcompensated for it with film study, work ethic, toughness. And man, to replace Steven Nelson with Kamari Lassiter makes a lot of sense. Steven Nelson was never the biggest guy or the fastest guy, but all of the IQ and the toughness worked for him in this Texans defense. So they are going to play him opposite of Stingley. I imagine they will play him in a lot more off coverage, top-down zone type of stuff, and that's smart. That's how you can play him as an outside corner and protect his speed. But it's not like he's an all-around horrible athlete, right? Like he has the acceleration, closing speed in a 5-yard area, the foot speed and change of direction to collapse downfield and take away out routes and digs and stuff. Like he could be nice here, man, but he is a rookie corner. Can't rank him out too high, and we just don't know what he's going to look like out there. So he's obviously a wild card for this secondary and this defense. Going to be mostly Desmond King in the slot. We're getting closer and closer to our interview with Brett. Brett has an awesome breakdown of how they might be able to mix things up in the secondary here. But, as the primary slot corner, Desmond King is just fine. Really smart zone player. He's a thicker slot corner. He defends the run. They can flex him in line. Not flex him in line, but flex him closer to the box, really, and have him stop the run. He's good at, baiting the quarterback. He seems to have, a couple beautiful interceptions every year. Not the most sticky coverage player. Definitely limited in the sense of if you want to play more man coverage or have him match guys up the seam, he just isn't much of an athlete at all. Never was, but especially at this stage in his career. So, he will get beat in coverage, but nice all-around slot corner. Not going to complain too much, but not too much of an impact player either. And then their corner depth is pretty meh. Jeff Okudah, C.J. Henderson, a pair of former top 10 picks. As much respect as I have for this coaching staff, I am not betting on them to save Jeff Okudah or C.J. Henderson. I just don't think Okudah is that good of an athlete. And Henderson, I just don't think he has it from a, football awareness and IQ standpoint. And if these guys got to come in, I'm not expecting anything other than replacement level, meh depth. Miles Bryant, makes sense as a backup to Desmond King in the sense that he's small, horrible athlete, but smart player that defends the run. Patriots fans were kind of excited to be done with Miles Bryant. Fun player at times, but just he gets cooked a lot because he just can't hang from a speed perspective. Mike Ford, Chris Boyd have played a little bit. They got some traits, but Yeah, there's not a lot of pieces in terms of depth that get me excited. They really need Stingley to stay healthy, and they need Kamari Lassiter to hit. And then, frankly, you have questions with the safeties as well. Jimmy Ward getting up there in age, 33 years old, and he as well has missed about half of each of his last 2 seasons. He's played 1,140 snaps total over the last 2 years. And when he was out there last year, I'm not going to say he was bad. He was more than fine. He was solid, made some nice plays, continues to be just a heat-seeking missile and an incredibly consistent tackler coming downfield. He's very Buda Baker-esque in terms of play style, but his overall impact in coverage did definitely diminish last year on Houston. And again, the age and the durability has to be brought into question. The probability that they're going to have to go to their depth for a decent chunk of the season is pretty high with him. And then Jalen Petrie as well. He's had his ups and downs. I still believe in Jalen Petrie. It's just his coverage consistency has not been good. He gets beat a lot. And they ask a lot out of him. They move him all over the formation. They'll have him man dudes up, play high zone, low zone, you name it. It's been a lot for him. He's got the speed, the foot quickness, the instincts, the ball skills to still self-correct and be more consistent in coverage. But to this point in his 2-year career, that hasn't been the case. And because they ask so much of him in run defense, not just in terms of diversity of role, but also the one of the roles they do ask him to do is play like essentially like a weak side linebacker a lot of the time, come down in the box and get nasty. He's entirely willing to do it, but he's 5'11", 200 pounds. It's a tough ask for the guy. So he has actually missed a lot of tackles. 18% missed tackle rate through his first 2 years just is not going to cut it. So he's a really fun player, but his tape is just all over the place. It's wild film because there's so much good in there, and then there's bad in there as well. So you add him to the list of questions, and then you do have to talk about the safety depth in a big way here because of the injury questions on Jimmy Ward. They have Eric Murray. He's fine, solid backup, veteran depth. MJ Stewart, I like him. Lonnie Johnson, all those guys can step in and have played, and they're not going to be really good, high-efficiency players, but you could do worse in terms of backups. But if you're a Texans fan, the guy that you're hoping is that guy that wins the opportunity basically to be the first man in, or as Brett breaks down in our interview, like there are different ways that he could get out there this year as a third safety. But the guy you're hoping that can be that and do that is Kalen Bullock, an exciting third-round pick, a ton of speed, young guy, 21 years old. I do think is pretty raw, still has a lot to learn, and I'm not going to say he's not ready, but I'm not certain that he is, if that makes sense. Was a good third-round pick, well worth it where they ended up picking him. I'm excited to see what he can eventually be in this defense, but in terms of a year-one impact, I'm a little more hesitant on that. But he does provide a lot of speed and range, ball skills, and range in the sense of run defense too, because his pursuit speed is so good. But that's really only if he can speed up his processing and ability to trigger with some of that stuff, which I know is going to be an emphasis from this coaching staff. But he just did take bad angles and was late to the ball a lot at USC. So I think there's all around so much to learn for him, but he is an exciting young player. And if they strike gold in the third round, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world in the event of a Jimmy Ward injury to kind of stomach that injury if and when it happens. And then you got Brandon Hill as well. 7th round pick last year. A lot of athleticism. Haven't heard much buzz from him, but he is kind of their type, that slot corner converted safety type. But needless to say, man, there's questions really galore with this secondary. I think it's totally fair that they don't rank out all that high as we rank these groups at their floor. But a lot of up arrows here. I think in the case of Stingley, Lassiter, Petrie, a chance for all of these guys to exceed my grades on them. And maybe Jimmy Ward can stay healthy. If all that stuff happens, this could be a very nice secondary. Top 10 is probably a little bit out of range for them, but they could definitely be closer to a strength than a weakness by season's end if things go right for this group. But if injuries pile up and these young players aren't as good as you expect, you are looking at potentially one of the worst secondaries in the league. So the conversation for the entire defense is a bit all over the map. Ultimately, they come in as my 9th-ranked defense, really with the pass rush and premium defensive coaching carrying a lot of the load there. I do see the holes on this defense, but if you have one of the best defensive minds and dudes getting after it up front, it's a pretty nice starting point. And it's a starting point that not only can you coach around, but you can use that to really help develop linebackers and corners when the pass rush is as good as they are. And even if on paper their run defense doesn't look like much, it didn't look like much last year, and they still finished 2nd in run defense DVOA. That's D'Amico Ryans. Now, I'm certainly not going to come out and project them to finish 2nd again. Could they do it? I mean, maybe. They actually came in 17th for run defense. They do genuinely have one of the worst rosters to stop the run in terms of their front 6. So it is hard to project them to repeat what they did last year. But for them to still come out 17th, with that said, I think is still showing a lot of respect to what they did last year and what D'Amico Ryans brings to the table there. But in terms of pass defense, despite some questions, they do come in 9th for me for overall pass defense. And again, that is good for the 9th-ranked defense in the league. Now, in terms of special teams, they're also really nice on this side of the ball. Great kicker-punter duo now in Fairbairn, and they signed Tommy Townsend. They have not had a great punter here for years, and Townsend has been a beast for the Chiefs. So potentially getting even better on this side of the ball when they were above average last year. Their PFF team grade for special teams was 14th. DVOA team grade was 7th. We love the coaching and what they can bring to the table as well. So they come in as my 6th-ranked special teams unit. And that all rounds out a really balanced top 10 football team here. 11th on offense, 9th on defense. Really upside to be even better than that on both sides of the ball. But as we look at the Venn diagram of strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, there are some position groups that I think could go either way. A couple of them being really important position groups. The offensive line, I mean, you could argue has 4 legit question marks on it. You could maybe cook that down to 3 question marks with half questions on the age of Shaq Mason and how much he's regressing and what does Titus Howard actually look like kicking back out to right tackle. But center, left guard are major question marks. So they overcame it last year, but could it turn into a little bit of a limiting factor in terms of the run game and pass protection and drop back situations? Certainly could. But again, could Howard be okay and the young players at center and left guard work out nicely and the offensive line is certainly a non-weakness? Yeah, I think that's possible as well. Linebacker, as we broke down, is just a little bit all over the place, but with upside, and likewise with the secondary. So I do think which side of the coin those 3 position groups end up landing on are going to be big deals in terms of deciding how good this Texans team is going to be this year. But man, the list of strengths is long. Quarterback, weaponry, offensive coaching, defensive coaching, pass rush, and a special teams to hang your hat on. A lot of areas that this team can dictate game flow to their opponent. And in terms of true weaknesses, it's not the longest list. But the 2 weaknesses I do list are kind of the same ilk on both sides of the ball that could potentially be a poor identity for the Texans, and that's just physicality at the line of scrimmage. Their run blocking ranked 32nd, and the spine of this defense between the defensive tackles and the linebackers, even down to the safety group, depending on what you get from Petrie and Ward, it's not great, and that could make them more matchup dependent against more kind of physical, inside running football teams. They might be able to just take the fight right to this Texans defense, and there might be games where there's not much they can do about that. But let's wrap up our end of things by taking a look at the Texans' schedule and their over-under, what my win projections are for this team. I don't understand why their win total is only 9.5 when everybody seemingly loves this team and the arrow just kind of objectively seems like it's pointing up on this team. Kind of feels like free money. That definitely stood out to me, especially when they're tied for 6th in Super Bowl odds. They're odds-on favorites to win their division. It just was strange. Their schedule is not easy. They do play the NFC North, which we know is a very good division, and they have to play the AFC East. A lot of good teams there, and their own division should be pretty good this year. They also have to go to Kansas City. They have to go to Dallas. So if you want an explanation for why the over-under is 9.5, I would say it's a challenging schedule, but they do still have a lot of games that I think they're pretty big favorites in. A couple of games against Tennessee, at New England, at Minnesota. I think hosting a young Bears team week 2, they should be, 5 or 6 point favorites in that one. So can they win 4 out of the 5 games they're supposed to win and then go 500 the rest of the way? Sounds about right to me. So if you're just talking about a situation where can they get to 10 wins, I would say yes, absolutely. Now, it doesn't pay very well to bet the over on that. Minus 144 for the gambling people out there. So that might be changing to 10 or 10.5 wins, and then it becomes a little bit more of a conversation. But even if I can say, all right, they do have some holes on this roster. They have some areas that might come back to bite them in the playoffs, maybe the second round of the playoffs. Like, do I love them at 15-1 on the Super Bowl in the AFC specifically? I would say not necessarily, but to get to 10 wins feels pretty good to me. On that note, it is time to bring in the wonderful Brett Kollmann. Do not go anywhere. Brett is a joy. You are not going to want to miss this interview. And now I am thrilled to welcome into the Texans Deep Dive, Brett Kollmann. And Brett, you usually come on, May when the Texans rank like 30th in this series, but now top 10. And you have a quarterback now with a little bit of hope and optimism. So I guess I want to say welcome to the life as a Packers fan now.
You couldn't fucking resist, could you? You fucking asshole. 30 years of dominance. 30 years of dominance. God. I can't tell. Okay, hold on. Sorry. I have to go on a diatribe. I know there's a Texas.
Please.
Bear with me, folks. Okay. So that Thanksgiving game, Thanksgiving game where, Lions are rolling and then the plucky upstart Packers, who I think were still sub 500 at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I shit you not. I was eating my Thanksgiving dinner that night. Like, not even paying attention to any of the conversation at the table, just like this sense of dread overcoming me because I knew. I was like, no. That's not just a good game. That's not just, Jordan Love, finally showed a flash. I was like, no. That's the start. Like, this is not going to stop. And then when we finally got to that Dontavian Wicks touchdown in the playoffs against the Cowboys, where he saw 0 and then, made a call at the line and threw a beautiful ball, I was like, that balcony's looking real nice right about now. I was so done, dude. I was so done. I have not been alive, and I'm 33. I have not been alive in a time period where the Packers didn't have a good quarterback. And I know I'm a Texans fan, and we got C.J. Stroud, and the next 10 to 20 years are looking great for us. But the fact that the next 10 to 20 years are looking great for you too, but they've never looked bad, get fucked. Like, this is not okay, man. Dude. This is not okay.
Well, I hope you at least enjoyed the 2 weeks of Brett Huntley like 5 years ago. I hope you at least soaked that in.
Anthony Barr, national treasure. Let's go.
Oh,
baby.
No. As he raises his drink. Oh, man. Well, like you said, at least obviously you're half Texans, half Bears fan. And what a difference a year makes. CJ Stroud showing what he does. Obviously, Caleb, but we're here to talk Texans. And I want to start there. I want to start with CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what are like your one or two just favorite traits that CJ Stroud has as a quarterback?
Oh man, it's so hard to narrow it down.
I know.
I would say ball placement is number one, but it's not just ball placement. It's the pace at which the ball gets there. It's the trajectory. It's the fact that he has every club in his bag, whether he's on platform or off platform. And he throws such a catchable ball, whether it's a dart into a tight window or a moon ball deep down the field. He just has access to such a wide variety of types of throws. Talk to quarterback coaches and they're like, clubs in the bag. Like, he's got every club in the bag. And the fact that he had every club in the bag as a rookie, like, he's throwing deep outs at 22-yard depth from the far hash and just putting it in a shoebox area. He's throwing seam balls and just like ripping it by the ear hole of the defender against cover two. That's not normal, right? That's not normal. And so the fact that he's so accurate, but so accurate at so many different velocities and trajectories is just special. Like, there's no other way to describe it. It's just special. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I didn't love Bryce Young as a prospect, because I did. But with the benefit of hindsight, if you're looking at just how CJ Stroud throws the ball, I'm just sitting there like, God, how did the Panthers mess that one up? Because it just seems so obvious now. Like, it seems so easy now, but like, you go back 18 months ago and you're like weighing these two things together, and then you see Stroud in the NFL, you're like, oh, it's like not even close.
Yeah, I feel like you can easily underrate accuracy until you see someone like CJ Stroud like truly weaponize it. And I think like we give so much credit to, well, not so much credit, but we mentioned like, oh, the receivers were so much better than we expected. But we don't know if Tank Dell would have worked for a different quarterback, because he's maybe the smallest catch radius for like a starting receiver. But you pair that with arguably the most accurate thrower of the football already in the league. Like, that's how, the meeting of the minds come together like that. So I agree. I think the accuracy is just prominent in his game. What about, though, just like anything you want to see an improvement on, whether it's a negative trait or just something he's not quite where he needs to be yet?
And God, I struggle to call it a negative trait, because we're talking about a top 5 to 6 quarterback in the league as a rookie, right?
Right.
I would love for him to have just like a little bit of self-preservation instinct sometimes. Kind of like what Kyler Murray does, where he just like gives himself up. He's like, I'm going to get sacked here, but I'm not going to get hurt while getting sacked.
Yeah.
There are some sacks that CJ took where I'm like, dude, please get down. Like, please get down. Like, you're setting yourself up to get gator rolled at a really awkward angle here. You're not going to outrun this linebacker that runs like 4-5 flat. Like, just accept defeat. And again, it's not all the time. It's actually very rare. But there was probably half of his sacks last year, and he didn't get injured, thankfully. But like half his sacks last year, I was like, please stop setting yourself up for like a devastating injury. Like, if they're on you, just go down, for the love of God. I love the aggressiveness, and I love the never say die attitude. But that same never say die attitude is what got Anthony Richardson torched by the end of September. I would love for CJ to just accept defeat. Okay, we'll get him back on 2nd and 15. Like, that's what I hope for.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I feel like he like leveled up in that Georgia game in college. That was like the big thing on him, is like, is he going to be this big play extender that he was in that Georgia game? I feel like he's still learning a little bit about like what he can get away with now that he's kind of like playing with a little bit more aggressiveness and play extension. So I think all that kind of comes together, because I do feel like if there is like anything negative to say from the 4 games of film that I watched on him, it is like, okay, there are some plays where like he could have just stayed in there and threw the dig, but he scrambled, and half the time he ends up making some crazy throw happen or make some crazy throw work anyway. But yeah, I think finding that natural balance between in structure and out of structure is maybe the one thing still to improve. All right, now I want to ask you a little film nerd shit. They have two, they're super well coached on both sides of the ball here. D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick. What are something both guys do from a film perspective and a schematic perspective that you just want to talk about here?
So what I love about Slowick is, and I think this goes back to, in the offseason when they were working with CJ before he played his first games. I think they realized, like, okay, this kid is accurate and he's got a cannon. All we have to do is just keep him protected. And even if we only have 2, 3, maybe 4 receivers at max running routes, and we're in 6-man protections, or in some cases 7, in some cases max protect, as long as he's protected, like, it doesn't matter if the defense outnumbers us down the field, he's going to be so accurate that we'll still pay it off with a big play. And so I love that Slowick made the conscious decision, like, we're going to prioritize protection over everything. And especially in the first half of the season, while they were trying to get CJ kind of acquainted to NFL speed, it was, we're in 21 personnel at the 3rd highest rate in the league. We're under center a lot. It's a lot of run, pass. But even when we do take shots down the field, it's off hard play action fakes with 6 and 7-man protections, 3 receivers running routes. It's all touchdown to check down stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna trust that he is so good, and that as long as we keep him upright with 7 bodies in front of him, he's going to pay it off. And again, they were down 80% of their starting offensive line to begin the year, so they kind of had to do it out of necessity.
Yeah,
it's like, we're not like Joe Burrow, out here where we're going to run 5-man protections all day and then just like say, okay, Joe, go do your thing.
Yeah.
But
not yet.
I love that they made that. Yeah, not yet. I mean, he could. And you look at the Tampa game. Tampa game, everything went out the window. They're like, buddy, put the cape on. Like, we need this. But I love that they made the conscious decision of, like, we're just going to prioritize protection. That's the first thing. And screw everything else. And then, as the year went on, they kind of got a little bit, what's the word? I don't want to say that they extended the leash, because that's not what it is, but they kind of let him spread things out a little bit more. But that first half of the season, I think, was so brilliant by Slowick to ease him in that way.
Yeah, I think that's super well said. Okay, what about D'Amico on the defensive side of the ball?
They were a very simple defense. Very simple. Like, one of the lowest blitz rates in the entire league. Schematically, they were pretty similar to the Jets, which makes sense. D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh. It's quarters and quarter half, and we're doing that all day long. They played a lot less man coverage than the Jets because it's the Jets. Like, yeah, they're going to play man coverage. So they pretty much just sat there in quarters and quarter half, and they rushed 4, and they didn't blitz. And they virtually never called sim pressures. I think they had like less than 2% sim pressure rate the entire year. So it's a simple defense, but they were fast. Like, everybody played fast. And I think Coach Vass has a great saying that I love, which is, if we're going to be wrong, we're all going to be wrong together. And because that'll make us right. If everybody's doing the same thing, but we're doing it fast, it's going to work. And so nothing was super exotic. They weren't doing all these crazy movements in the back end, like what you see with Steve Spagnuolo doing. It was very just structurally sound, and we're prioritizing speed and rallying to the ball and making sound tackles. And you're going to have to mount 10, 11, 12 play drives against us. And eventually, one of these plays, Will Anderson or Jonathan Grenard are going to mess something up. And then we're going to get you in a long yardage situation, and then you're screwed. So it worked really well. I still think they're going to do the same thing this year, because why not? Except they have even better personnel this year, so it's probably going to work even better.
Yeah, and it's super impressive that he was able to accomplish that. I was just pulling up, like, how many defensive players played for them this year. I think I'm seeing 39 different defenders got snaps for them last year. That's just mental. Like, that's insane. So to still have, like, an identity on the defense, and for guys to fly around and play fast, I think just from a raw coaching perspective, like as a teacher, super impressive for sure.
I mean, God, he had Blake Ashford playing like an all-pro linebacker. Like, come on now.
Well, that's not that impressive. He's just Cashman.
I know you're a Cashman guy. Which,
I'm
by
a
the way,
huge Cashman.
he's now back in Minnesota. So if you ever feel like going home, go see your guy play.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the high school he played at is right down the road, Eden Prairie High School. They kicked our ass every single year. A linebacker factory, by the way. Nick Rallis I'm just kidding. He played for Edina. Just kidding. But we do have some big name linebacker products.
The coach?
The Cardinals Nick Rallis. I played against him in high school, but he was Edina, not Eden Prairie.
Did he just destroy everybody? I bet he
did. Oh yeah, dude. It was we spent like 3 days preparing for how we were going to stop him. He was middle linebacker and just detonated our game plan. Yep.
That's great.
Yep. Oh, man. He's awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about just kind of the off season in terms of player movement and stuff. What is the position group you think is most upgraded from last year to this year?
Oh man, I'm just going to speak about it generally because it's really because of two guys. Secondary, right? I was a big Kamar Lassiter guy. I was a big Bullock guy as role players, right?
Yeah.
Bullock, he's more that kind of that classic post safety. Like, I don't expect him to be out here like Malik Mustafa, plugging up runs at the goal line. Like, that's not his thing. His thing is like be rangy, be an athlete, go get the ball. Like, but they didn't have that, right? So to get an actual true post safety with range, like that was a big need for them. So they got that. Really happy with that. And then I love the Kamar Lassiter pick personally, and he was a very polarizing prospect. And I get the testing numbers and everything like that, but if you're just looking at, I think the role he's going to play for them, I liken Derek Stingley to. If you remember the Rams secondary from several years ago, or a few years ago at this point, Derek Stingley would be like their Jalen Ramsey, right? Like the aggressive press boundary corner. And then Kamar Lassiter, I think, is going to be their Darius Williams. So, the field side corner that kind of plays more in space. And it's less about, matching up with guys man to man and more so about, do you have the feet and the hip fluidity to be able to play in space and obviously tackle and make plays on the ball, where it's more about instincts and everything like that. Because again, if you're field side corner and they're on a hash, ball's going to be in the air longer. So it's really more about like, how quick can you transition to get to that spot that's being targeted, more so than like, I'm lining up one-on-one against DK Metcalf, hope I don't die. So I love that mix of skill sets they have in their corner room now, particularly with their outside corners. I love the mix of skill sets they have in their safety room with Petrie and Bullock and all that. It's a very diverse group, but just knowing how this defense plays and the coverages they tend to favor, I think everybody has a spot and everybody has a role. And I think it just makes sense this year.
Yeah. I do want to follow up on Bullock there because you mentioned how he kind of fits, but obviously they have both Petrie and Ward there at safety. Do you think he's just kind of like how do you think they're going to use him? Is it just in a dime role and then they'll play him deep, or is it more than that? You think they might move one of those safeties into more of a slot role and Bullock will be more of a starting role? How do you see that playing out?
I think there's a universe where Petrie gets a lot of work as a nickel. In like a 3 safety look. And they have like 4 guys that could play nickel. So I think it's going to be very matchup dependent, game plan dependent in terms of who does what. And some of them are going to get a lot of snaps one week and almost nothing the next week. But I think there's a universe where it's like, hey, we're going up against a team where we really want to prioritize, being in middle field close structures for a lot of the game, whether it's cover 3 or cover 1, because we want to protect the post. We want to protect the middle of the field. We want to be, a sound run defense. We're probably not going to play as much quarters this week just based on how they tend to attack quarters. We don't think we can handle what they're giving us there. So we're going to play these more conservative coverage structures, which is what cover 3 is. It's like the most conservative coverage structure there is, right? So in those kind of weeks, I could see all of them being on the field together. And then I'm sure there's going to be some weeks where he's getting everybody water and saying, good job, guys. So I think it just depends,
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of provides the next evolution in D'Amico's defense. Like you said, they were pretty basic, but now they're they're flexible. I'm excited to see that. All right, let's talk a little draft. Or just kidding. One more question. What position group worries you the most for the Houston Texans?
Oh, it's got to be defensive tackle. It's got to be. And not that I think they're like bad there, but boy, they're thin. They're really thin. Like they can't afford injuries there. And I know you can't fix every roster hole in 1 year, let alone in 2 years. But this coming draft class, which I've taken a couple early peeks at, there's some defensive tackles in this group. Yeah, man, they need one of them. They're probably not going to be good or bad enough to get Mason Graham unless something really horrible happens. But he's not the only one. There's a bunch of good DTs coming out in this class, and they need to get at least one. Like they need their own Kobe Turner.
Can you imagine? Is it Walker from Kentucky? Can you imagine just putting a 350-pound super freak in the middle of this defense?
Dude, Walker. So that kid. That kid would probably start on like a third of NFL teams right now.
Yeah.
Like right now. And in the Bengals immediately. But like he's really good. And I think all the Jordan Davis hype from a few years ago, I think we're going to see a lot of that again for him. But not to get too far into the draft.
We're getting a good 7 months ahead of ourselves. But we are who we are, Brett. We can't help ourselves.
We are who we are, and especially when you're a fan of a team that has terrible defensive tackle depth, you can't help but look ahead.
Absolutely. Okay, well, hey, we're now on the topic of draft. So I feel like you already kind of broke down Lassiter. I had a question on him, but it sounds like you like him. You like his fit. I love how you broke down his fit there. But what about beyond Lassiter and maybe beyond Bullock? What was maybe your favorite pick from this draft? And then what was a pick that maybe had you a little bit like, I don't really see it on that guy? If there was one.
Oh, man. I would love to get your insight on this. I wasn't a Blake Fisher guy. And especially... I was, well, let me expand. I wasn't a Blake Fisher guy ahead of Roger Rosengarten. How about that? I was a
heavily
huge
disagree with
guy.
you. I actually heavily disagree with you on this one.
Okay, sell me on it.
Okay, well, with Rosengarten, I guess it's a leap of faith he just has to get stronger. I do not think he can play with his current play strength. I think he's going to get thrown around left and right if he's out there as he was at Washington. Loved his technique, loved his athleticism. So I saw the projection, but I had Rosengarten as more of a third, fourth round guy. And then with Fisher, I didn't find myself seeing a lot of weaknesses on him. I felt like everything was pretty balanced on him. I thought he checked a lot of boxes, still super young, was younger than Rosengarten. I definitely felt like the play strength was much more there with him than it was with Rosengarten. Even if his technique wasn't quite where it was in terms of hand placement and foot consistency, I thought it was much more of a coachable thing with him.
For me, and again, I'm a Rosengarten truther, I guess you could say. I understand the play strength thing, and I just kept going back in my head of like, I know, but Brian O'Neill wasn't really strong when he was coming out either. And I love the first step and I love the hands. And I'm like, man, we're just talking 10 pounds, man. We're talking 10 pounds. Like just start shoveling some biscuits down his mouth in the cafeteria and get him just a few extra pounds. Have him do some yoga. I don't know, anything to build that core strength. Cause God, he just had everything else. And I didn't hate Fisher as a prospect. But I think there's probably 3 tackles that went after him where I was like, ugh, if we were going to go there, that probably would have gone a different direction. So that's like the one that I honestly, out of the whole class that I just didn't jive with. As for my favorite non-Lassiter picks, and I already touched on Bullock. So how about I talk about, I'm assuming you watched him as well because you're a maniac like me. I was a big Solomon Byrd guy. I love Solomon Byrd, and he's another guy who again didn't test super well. But when you throw on the tape of him, his speed to power was really something. And if you have power, like you can win in this league. I'm not super impressed by guys that have crazy first steps, but like if they try to run into somebody's chest, they don't go anywhere. Bird had legitimate pop in his hands, legitimate ability to compress the pocket and kind of speed up the clock of a quarterback. And even then, I thought his testing, I don't think his testing really showed what kind of athlete he really is, because I did not expect the numbers that he put up. Like I didn't think he was going to be like a freak, but I didn't think it was going to be like that low. And then if you look at him at the Shrine Bowl, I mean, he was completely unblockable. There were some pretty good offensive linemen at the Shrine Bowl this year, and he just ran through everybody. He had like, I think it was like 2.5 sacks or something like that in the Shrine game, but he dominated in practices too. He's a great leader, super tough. You know, talking to his teammates at USC, like nobody messed with him ever because they knew he'd beat the crap out of him because he's really strong. I love Sullenberg. Getting him in the 7th round, it reminded me of when the Broncos got John Cooper, who was another 7th round edge rusher that I thought was going to go way higher than he did. Different kind of profiles there, but I'm talking just in terms of like, I think they got a legitimate contributing edge in the 7th round, and that's pretty hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless you're the Packers.
God.
No, I actually didn't really get to Bird. I got to him kind of like really late. I didn't get to Shrine this year, so that didn't do me any favors there. But I saw the testing, and I must have just picked up the wrong game and just didn't see much, so I didn't have much of an opinion on him. But the testing numbers were so bad that I was like, he can't be that. Like something was going on.
It's like not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah. But I definitely dismissed him because the testing numbers were pretty bad. But cool. That's good to know. We'll keep an eye out for him. All right. So you're repping the Underdog Fantasy shirt.
Of course.
We have a bit of a dilemma with the Houston Texans this year. 3 wide receivers going in basically the first 3 rounds. I'm curious how when you're doing your best ball drafts, how are you sorting through these guys? Do you find yourself taking one over the other or passing on one over the other? How do you sort through it?
I'm prioritizing Nico because I think Nico's the one here.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be the one that you can kind of hang your hat on, at least, when it comes to fantasy for being the most consistent point scorer, because I also think he's going to get a lot of work in the red zone. Not that the others won't get any work in the red zone. I feel like, okay, in an offense that prioritizes being in 21 and 12 personnel a lot, like who are the receivers that are going to be on the field? I know Nico ain't coming off. So
right.
I think he's going to be the one. And then as far as the other productive receiver, is it Tank? Is it Diggs? I think it's going to be week to week, right? So, you mentioned Underdog. Like if we're talking about best ball, like best ball is the format you want these guys in, because I think there's going to be a Diggs week and then there's going to be a Dell week, and it's going to depend on how much 11 are we in, what are the matchups. And I really don't think we're ever going to know from week to week who the number 2 to pop off is going to be. I think Nico, I'm pretty confident, is going to be consistent, but everybody else is completely up in the air. So if you're in like a normal ass redraft league, just take Nico. If you're doing best ball, I would probably say Tank, because I know their ADPs are like right next to each other, but
yeah,
I feel like Tank,
literally 33 and 34 right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think Tank, his connection with CJ is so, these guys are like best friends, right? Like I think his connection with CJ is so good that when push comes to shove, take the guy who has the chemistry. So I'd probably go with Tank there.
Yeah, you're like right in line with me. I probably am not taking Tank or Nico in a redraft. I like what you said about best ball. There is like a 5% of me that feels like they're just not going to need Diggs and he's going to be a pain in the ass and they're going to trade him away like week 8. Like in a 5% case scenario where there's going to be like, look, we literally don't need you. We have plenty of guys to throw to, and all you're doing is making noise on the sideline. We could flip you for a 4th round pick, someone that needs you.
Can I throw a scenario at you? I don't know what Jordan Addison's injury is, because I just saw he got hurt like 5 minutes before I came on with you. But if that ends up being serious,
Bring him
Stephon
home.
Diggs returning to Minnesota for the Sam
Oh,
Darnold redemption
man.
tour.
God, him and Darnold and Justin Jefferson would be just pure entertainment.
At that point, we can definitively say that the Vikings won the trade because then they just get both Jefferson and Diggs.
Right.
100%.
Nah, I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm sure everything will be just fine with Stephon Diggs. All right.
So confidently.
Oh, man. All right. Last question as a send off here. I've been doing this with all of our guests, and if you want to put a little wager on it, it's up to you. We could talk now or later. Me and EJ did a little $50 charity bet. We can bet Canes in Dallas, whatever we determine. We can announce that later. But over under 9.5 wins on the Texans, and I'll just take whatever you don't.
Oh, over.
Yeah,
over. First of all, is that what their actual line is?
That's what their actual line is right now on FanDuel. Yeah, I know, which is why I almost didn't even want to do this, because the other ones, it's like, you can pick one and I'll take the other side. This one, I'm like, I do not like being on the under of that.
What are they expecting, a meteor to hit Houston? Like, how's that even?
I don't know.
Remotely okay.
Their schedule's not easy.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it, but
because I think they have the AFC East and the NFC North, I want to say. So I guess that's what they're factoring in. But yeah, it's a very friendly line.
Yeah, no, give me the over.
Why don't we go 10? Why don't we go 10 to make it a little more interesting?
I think I'd still go over.
Okay.
I'd still go over. I think the only way they don't is if Stroud gets hurt. I think that's it. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Because
okay. Cool.
I mean, they were a division round team that beat the brakes off of Cleveland last year,
right?
When the roster wasn't even as good as it is now, and they were dealing with all those injuries. And again, maybe this is just pure hopium, but I mean, 9.5. Okay, then let's go.
I don't get it. It's like all the negatives on the Texans are like, you're finding little nitpicks of like, okay, maybe teams figure out Stroud, or maybe the teams, crack the code on Slowick's scheme, or the defense takes a huge step back with all the turnover. But it's like, everything's looking pretty rosy right now. So I don't know. I definitely would.
It feels like we're talking about the Lions, right? Where it's like, oh, their corners might come back to bite them, and it's like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I know.
Like, they're going to put up 35 points a game. Like, are you going to put up 35 against Detroit? Maybe sometimes, but not 17 times. So I don't know. It's just one of those teams.
Well, what about me having them ranked 10th from a power ranking coming into the year? You want to tear me up for that, or you think it's fair?
No, I think it's fair because honestly, after the top, let's say 3 to 5 teams, there's probably a solid group of 10 teams that you can put in any order you want to.
Right. Yep.
So like, I think you're 100% correct, because any team plus or minus 4 of them could beat them, and they could beat any of those teams too. I mean, hell, they could beat any of the top 4 teams if they really want to put their mind to it. But like, and total rant here, people get so bent out of shape about preseason rankings.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, this doesn't mean that if they played each other 10 times, they would win 10 out of 10.
Right.
It just means that if we had to choose, gun to your head, who do we think would win the majority? Like, in a 10-game series, who's winning 6 of them? Like, this is who. Exactly. That's how you do the rankings, right? It's not like they're definitively good, they're definitively trash. That's not how the NFL works. Like, I mean, for God's sake, the Cardinals beat the crap out of the Cowboys last year. So everybody's very, very close to each other. And I think people take the rankings a little bit, they throw a little bit too much crap at you for it sometimes. It's like, I'm not saying you're a bad team, well, other than a couple of legit bad teams. It just means that if I had to choose, I'm choosing X number of teams ahead of this one. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Cool. All right, Brett, this was a ton of fun. Obviously, everybody go binge the bootleg off-season series if you haven't already. I mean, I when EJ was on for the Bears, was talking about how, like, I feel like the way the angle you guys come at it plus my angle for my viewers, it's like the perfect culmination to get ready for the season. So Make sure everybody goes, subscribes to Bootleg. Anything else you got going on you want to talk about, Brett, before we get out of here?
Well, I finished recording a JJ McCarthy episode about 10 minutes before that news broke. So I guess I got to go record that one all over again and make some adjustments.
No.
But spoiler alert, I think it's pretty good. So, we'll see in 2025. But the NFC North is not just the Packers and 3 other teams anymore, Marcus. We're coming for you, all of us.
All right. Sam Darnold season. Here we go. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks, Brett. And we'll see y'all later. So a huge thanks to Brett for taking some time out of his busy schedule for joining us here on this Texans Deep Dive. And thank you to all of you still with us here at the end of this video. If you haven't hit that like button yet, if you could take a second to do that, it really does help. We're in the home stretch now, baby. 9 more of these teams to go. Let me know in the comments down below. What do you think of the 10th ranking for the Texans? Too high, too low? And who do you think comes next? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.